I've always been a firm non-believer of the paranormal. However, after the events of today, my perspective has definitely changed. Back when I lived in New York, I worked as a taxi driver. It was relatively easy money, and sometimes I would have some interesting interactions with people. All of this made the job fun, interacting with people, hearing their stories. Sometimes I would have great conversations with them. It was 11 p.m. and I got a call asking to pick someone up by a hotel. I headed that way, and when I arrived, I saw a young woman carrying 2 travel bags. "Where to?" I asked as she got in the car. There was a 10-second delay before she answered me. "Washington Square Park," she said. While I was driving, I tried to make a little conversation. "So how's your day been?" I asked her. She remained silent. She then tapped on the glass twice. I'd figured she didn't want to talk, so I continued driving. 10 minutes had gone by. Neither of us said a word. She began knocking on the glass. "Everything okay?" I asked her. She remained silent. She started knocking on the glass harder. At this point, we were only a minute away from her stop. Once we got there, the knocking had stopped. "Here's your stop," I said. She remained silent. I looked up at her and she was staring at me with the most lifeless expression I had ever seen. "Hey, this is your stop," I said. She began knocking on the glass again. "Is everything okay, miss?" I said. She began knocking harder and harder on the glass, to this point where she was practically punching the window. I looked down on my phone to dial 911, and once I looked back up, she had disappeared. There was no signs of life, no bags, no nothing. I hadn't even heard my car door open. She was just gone. Believe me, I've tried every single rational explanation. I still don't understand what happened on that day. After this time, I never worked as a taxi driver during the night. I eventually moved away from New York. Now, every single time I think of my time in New York, I think of this situation. Dead leaves lay scattered across the ground. A cold breeze sends the empty branches swaying. It's the most wonderful time of year, and my favorite part is all the sweet, sweet candy. I reach down to take a piece, tongue salivating in anticipation of sugar. Then I see it, the damn sign reading, "Children in costume may take 1 piece." Well, damn, no costume this year means no candy. "Aren't you going to take a piece?" "Nah, the sign says I can't." "Oh, I don't think anyone would mind if you just take 1. "Well, it is just 1 piece. I glanced around and then swiped a piece, plopping it straight into my mouth. The chocolate melted away, bringing a rush of happy juice straight to my brain. Yet the taste faded, leaving me with a craving for more. Why not take 1 more? 1 piece, 2 pieces, 0 pieces. The difference is completely unnoticeable. Damn, their words struck a chord, resonating through my whole body as truth. It's not a big deal. They won't even notice. Hell, they're the ones who chose to discriminate against the people who aren't dressed up. As I passed by, I quickly snagged a second piece on my way out. Normally, the streets are left empty at night. People like to stay inside when the sun starts to head down. But tonight is Halloween, and there is magic in the air that brings us all out into the fresh air. I was pulled from my enjoyment of the spectacle by a voice. So many people in costumes, pretending to be something they're not, and people reward this behavior with free candy. Yet, people like you, people who really appreciate Halloween and celebrate by simply being your true self, are cut off from the flow of free candy. Free for them, but not for you. Gods, this guy is making a lot of sense. It's not fair that they get all the candy, but it's not like I can do anything about it. What if you could? What's to stop you from simply taking a bag of candy and running off with it? I looked at the kids scattered about with bulging sacks. I wanted that bag. Nah, it ain't right to take their candy. It would literally be taking candy from a baby. But they are the special ones. They get candy just given to them. They can always just get more. Don't take their candy. You can go home empty, sad, rejected. Take their candy, and they just have to knock on another door to get some more. And you get to right the wrong of not sharing when they have so much. After the words, I only felt resentment towards the people on the streets. But most of them are just dumb kids, and it ain't right to take candy from a kid. Most of them, not all of them. Look, see? Take. A man was walking down the street, an Old West outfit with a big shiny sheriff badge, and next to him was a kid dressed the same, but the badge read Deputy. They both held a bag of candy, each one of them taking a piece at each stop. Well, fuck, this is a grown-ass man out trick-or-treating. That ain't right. If you want candy as an adult, just go buy your own damn candy. My blood starts to boil as I watch this prick getting more and more candy. You don't want to take candy from a kid. Well, that doesn't look like any kind of kid to me. Look at him, another corrupt sheriff, using their power to wrongfully take from the people. Someone should really do something about this. Fuck, they're right. Someone should do something about this. You could be someone. Their words filled me with purpose and righteous anger. That drove me forward at a dash right up to the corrupt sheriff. Then I punched him right in his face, only pausing for a moment to grab his now dropped bag of candy before booking it. I could hear the horse hooves beating behind me as I ran. The sheriff's posse had assembled behind me, giving chase after me. I swung around a corner and hid between two bushes, not trying to gasp for breath as the horses dashed past me. Rioters hooting and hollering about how they were going to get revenge for the deputy. I felt confused by this, because I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot the deputy. After they were long gone, I picked up my treasure and placed a piece in my mouth. It sent happy feelings flowing all over, each piece tasting so much sweeter than the last. And taking it from the sheriff just makes it all the sweeter. I chuckled to myself thinking they would be out searching the hills for weeks, yet they would never catch me, because I am a smooth criminal. All too soon the candy was gone, and I just needed more. I had to have more, yet the streets were now empty. Not a person in sight to take their candy. Oh, I see that look in your eyes. You have a taste for it too, haven't you? Don't look so sad. Just look and use a little imagination. There is always opportunities if you can see them. I looked around, desperate for anything that could hold candy. Then I noticed a large piñata sitting by a house. I paused for a moment to see if anyone was watching. Then I rushed up to take my new prize. I couldn't lift it, so I simply dragged it away. Damn, this thing is heavy. Yes, just imagine how full of treasure it is. As I worked to drag it off, I did just what that voice said. The promise of chocolates, caramels, and gummy bears filled my mind and kept me pulling and sweating the whole way home. Excellent work, my friend. Now let's crack this open and get the deliciousness locked inside. Grabbing my baseball bat, I placed myself over it and took 3 long breaths before swinging down with all of my might. Blood and brains spattered across the driveway, and I dropped the bat clattering to the ground, frozen by the cold chill of shock as I watched the blood flowing out of the body. A clawed hand dug into my shoulder. Just look at that. Isn't it beautiful? Around Halloween when I was 11, I went to a haunted trail with some friends of mine from karate. Place was your standard higher-end haunted trail, you know the kind, with a heated ticket booth, concession stands, and a fire pit where the performers could take their breaks, as well as people who were cold standing in line. The guy introducing us to the trail told us up front the actors in the trail wouldn't touch us, and would even be fired if they were caught doing so. So we entered the first part of the trail. It's the kind where there's themed structures or areas, with few winding paths through the woods leading between them. The paths were lit with red Christmas lights and had chains laying on the ground, so they weren't really employees on the trails, just the themed zones at the beginning and ends of the trails. The longest trail through the woods was the one that led from the clown section to the part that had a bunch of people with chainsaws towards the end. Something that's important to know about this place is that it was very professional looking. All the costumes and props could have been props in AHS or Saw or something. The clowns all wore old-timey looking costumes that were authentic looking and professionally aged. Plus, they all wore makeup, not masks. A few dozen yards after leaving the clown house, a clown wearing a shitty polyester costume and rubber mask that couldn't have cost $20 walked out of the woods toward the trail. The fake bloodstains on his costume looked like ketchup, not the dark red stuff that stained the other clown costumes. I had really long platinum blonde hair at the time. See my post on our Blunder Years for a shorter version of it about a year earlier than this. So this dude stumbles up to me and fucking yoinks my hair and holds it up. He pulls a very real kitchen knife, not painted to look rusty or anything, just a standard 9-inch or so knife with a dark handle, and gets his mask close to me. I could smell whiskey and cigarettes through the mask. He tells me in a thick southern accent, "You got some pretty ass hair. I think I'll take me some." He set the hand with the knife on my shoulder, and at this point, I stopped having a silent emotional breakdown and tear away from the guy, stomped on his foot and ran away. This made him drop the knife, which made a light metallic noise when it hit the ground. I heard him yell, "Fucking cunt," while I was running, and watched him slink back into the woods, away from the trail, from a safe distance. Never heard anything more from him. When I was little, I just assumed he was a worker that didn't quite understand the rules. But as I got older, I realized two things. One, his shitty costume and the real knife wouldn't be allowed in the haunted house. Two, with a better understanding of the area around the haunted trail, I realized that there was a trailer park known for drunk redneck antics and meth dealers in the direction he came from and returned to. I really don't think he was supposed to be there. This happened about 13 years ago when I was a sophomore in college, attending a liberal arts school in Suffolk County, New York. Within the first month or two of freshman year, I'd found myself in a very tight-knit group of fellow theater geeks. 6 guys, myself included, and 1 girl. And they all loved horror movies and ghost stories. I had found my crew. Freshman year was tough, but we all held each other up and made the whole experience much more enjoyable for one another. At the beginning of sophomore year, we decided that in October, as the Halloween season was ramping up, we would find a creepy wooded spot in a nearby town some night and scare the crap out of ourselves. We did some research and found that there was a particularly isolated area about 30 minutes away, infamous for paranormal sightings. Perfect. The 7 of us split into 2 different cars and headed out into the night. Allow me to set the scene. You turn off a busy main road, flooded with strip malls and restaurants and whatnot, and you're almost immediately greeted by complete darkness. Again, this area was very heavily wooded. It was essentially a large web of winding roads surrounded by trees. Very few streetlights and very few houses. Without GPS or a good sense of direction, one could easily get lost in there. We all made sure to have fully charged phones and flashlights, just in case. But the goal was to keep driving until we collectively decided to pull over and go exploring. So, per the directions, we made a left off the main road, driving for 30 minutes or so into the dark network, picking directions at random, just getting intentionally lost. Our cars made a turn, and to our surprise, there was a huge log in front of us. We had reached a dead end of some kind, with nothing but trees beyond it. We all got out to see exactly what this was, stepped over the log, and noticed 2 narrow trails leading into different directions. This seemed like as good a time as any to grab our flashlights and do some amateur ghost hunting. We flipped a coin and set off the trail to the right. The trail was so narrow that we had to walk single file to avoid getting whacked by branches. For whatever reason, I ended up in the back. I'm usually pretty rational and level-headed, but I have to say, the further we went in, the more I was overcome with an uneasy feeling. I kept hearing sounds deep in the woods, unable to shake the feeling that we were being watched. But I seemed to be the only one that heard these things, so I shrugged it off as my imagination. And in any case, the whole point of us being there was to get scared. Not to mention the fact that we were 7 able-bodied college students. What would we come across that could take us down? We headed down this trail for about 20 minutes, and just when I thought it would never end, we came to a massive clearing. And I mean massive. It was a large, open field of unkempt grass, comparable in scope to a golf course, but not nearly as well manicured. Trees surrounded the entire field, which was so large we could not see the end from where we were standing. I was thrilled to get out of that narrow trail, but I don't think any of us were expecting to find an area so vast. One of us looked to the right and said, "Hey, check that out." We all turned and there was an old dilapidated house several hundred yards away. The house was completely dark, with no cars or signs of anyone actually living there. We walked over and shined our flashlights at it, and sure enough, the windows and doors were all boarded up. I managed to peer in between the boards of one of the windows, and what I could see was an old white couch covered in plastic, but an otherwise empty room. Whoever used to live here, they were long gone. Because there was no way in, and because we all felt sufficiently creeped out by the house anyway, we decided to walk closer to the trail we had come in from, have a seat in the field, and figure out where to go next. We walked towards the narrow trail, but before we could sit, my friend Mark stopped what he was doing. His expression dropped and he pointed. We all turned, and on the very far left side of the field, directly across from where we had come in, we could see someone tall, lanky, and pale dancing among the trees. And by dancing, I mean it was skipping around, grabbing a tree, swinging around it, and then doing the same to another tree. Basically, a do-si-do. The moon was so bright and the woods so dark, it actually took us a second for us to really understand what we were looking at. Jay, the 6'4" skeptic of the group, wasn't seeing it. I leaned into him, pointed in that direction, and said, "Jay, look where I'm pointing. Don't you see that?" He squinted a bit, and the second he saw it, he gasped with everything he had, clutched my arm and whispered, "What the fuck is that?" What happened next sent shockwaves through all of us. Whoever this was, they stopped dancing and looked in our direction, and even started charging straight at us. Without even thinking, we freaked and ran back to the trail. Yet again, Jay was the only one who didn't see what was happening. He shouted after us, "Guys, what is it? Where are you going?" After about 15 seconds of running like hell, I heard Jay scream, "Holy shit!" I looked back and saw his flashlight following the rest of us into the trail. While the walk into the woods took about 20 minutes, we made it back to our 2 cars, hopped in, and we were peeling away and closer to 5. Once we were a safe distance away, we pulled over, got out, and checked in with each other about what just happened. My heart was pounding, and I know everyone else was feeling the same way. Nearly 15 years later, we are all still friends, living in different states, yet keeping in touch through marriages, divorces, children, etc. But occasionally, out of the blue, one of us will send a group text to the others with something to the effect of, "The woods, that really happened?" It most certainly did. The experience is always in the back of my mind, and I'm pretty sure it will always be. Here's the thing that still resonates with me about that night. Whoever that was, they were dancing maniacally in the woods at 1 a.m, and then ran directly for a group of young adults, not at all fazed by the fact that they were severely outnumbered. Did he know we were there from the second we parked? Was he the sound I kept hearing when we walked the trail? Whatever the case may be, when he came for us that night, you can be sure none of us wanted to stick around and see what he was truly capable of. My story is when 2 of my friends, K and B, for the sake of their privacy, were out trick-or-treating. We decided to go to the rich area since we all lived in the more poor middle-class area. While we were entering the rich neighborhood, A truck with 5 to 6 men drove past us and yelled something. We assumed that they were drunk. We decided to ignore them and be on our way to get the good candy. We were just minding our own business when the truck stops about 20 feet ahead of us. At this point, the three of us are starting to feel uneasy. We all decided to stop and see what these men were planning on doing. One of the men hops out of the truck and then reaches his arm into the truck and pulls out a chainsaw. This man then proceeded to run full speed at us with the chainsaw. This freaked the crap out of us. Kay and I ran up one side of the street towards a friend's house in hopes to hide out there. B ran in the opposite direction. Kay and I lost the man with the chainsaw after a few minutes, but we hadn't heard from B in a while. After about a half an hour of calling B's phone and wandering around the neighborhood, we finally found him. This was one of the most terrifying experiences that I had ever had. About a year ago, I was working late October in a grocery store and doing my rounds of carts, putting them back in the store from customers who left them outside. A man approached me, asking me to follow him to his car and help him read something. At first, it seemed legit until he told me to go near his car on the other side of the store. I didn't feel comfortable, and even though I'm a guy, the dude was taller and seemed sketchy as fuck. So I told him I just needed to go inside and check something really quick. This is where things get weird, because as I go in and tell my manager about all of this, he walks in, sees me talking to my manager, asks a question unrelated to his needed help of reading something like, "Where are your eggs?" And he walked off, as if he didn't know me or what he had asked me just prior. I always wonder if I overthought about it and should have helped him, but then I remember if he really wanted my help with something, especially something as innocent as helping him read something, why didn't he mention anything while I was with my manager? Overall, I'm glad I didn't follow him to his car. "Please, Daddy," Sarah begged through convulsive sobs. "I promise I'll be good." Ben Flanagan's heart broke. He ceased shoveling and wrapped his arms around his daughter. "You're always a good girl, honey," Ben answered, holding her tightly. "Robbie is a good boy too. We just don't have a choice, that's all." "You're the best children in the world," Rita Flanagan added. "It is for your own good." Rita kissed Sarah's forehead and lowered her into the casket. Sarah wiped away snot from her face. Her teeth chattered. She whimpered as the lid closed over her. "Come on, son," Ben said to Robbie, pointing to the shovel. "Yes, sir," Robbie replied. After 30 minutes, the casket was several feet underground. Ben checked the garden hose to see if it was clear. He didn't want his daughter to suffocate. "Can you breathe?" Ben shouted into the hose. "Yeah," Sarah's voice echoed back. "I'm so sorry, honey," Rita apologized. Out of the corner of his eye, Ben saw his neighbor Jeff watching them over the fence between their yards. "Howdy, neighbors," Jeff greeted. "How's it hanging?" Ben replied. "Same shit, different Halloween," Jeff answered. "Need any help?" Ben looked at his watch, 11:45 p.m. He frowned, acknowledging his neighbor's hidden meaning. "Yeah, I could use the help so long as you're finished," Ben answered. "Jake's been out since 10, Ambien. Got him roped up and in the basement closet, padlocked and sealed," Jeff said. "More worried about Robbie, to be honest. No offense, boy." "None taken, sir," Robbie answered. 12 years of this shit under his belt. "Robbie knows what's up," Ben said. "You ready, son?" Robbie took a deep breath and said, "It's go time." "Atta boy. This last time ain't nothing," Jeff said, coming into the yard. "Lay down," Rita commanded. Robbie laid across the thick, king-size blanket and crossed his arms over his chest. Jeff and Ben rolled Robbie around in the blanket, leaving only his head free. Rita placed another blanket on the ground and did it again for good measure. "Can you breathe all right?" Ben asked. "Yes, sir." "Good shit," Jeff answered and checked his watch, and not a moment too soon. It was 11:59 p.m., then the clock struck midnight, and it was Halloween. The crickets stopped playing their nocturnal songs. The stillness of the night weighed heavily upon them. eyes firmly set on the dirt mound where Sarah's casket had been buried. Robbie hissed words in a language and a voice that weren't his. His eyes glowed ruby red. Ectoplasm leaked from his nose and mouth. They paid him no mind. At the cusp of manhood, the demonic link was at its weakest. The blankets would suffice. The dirt over Sarah's casket moved like the ground was breathing. Despite the weight of the earth and casket, what was now Sarah lifted the coffin lid. Ben cursed himself for not nailing it shut. He hoped it would hold. God help them all if it didn't. This story is so cliche and ridiculous that no one ever believes it's real, except for those that were there. It was Halloween 2012, my senior year of high school. I went to a Catholic school, so we always had the day off after Halloween, because it's considered a church holy day, so my friends were game to start our weekend early. On nights where we didn't go to parties, we usually do the same thing. We'd sit on my front steps for a couple hours and joke around. Then we would walk the neighborhood and usually end up at this shitty pizza place across town because the prices were so cheap. Since a few of us had recently broken up with our girlfriends, we weren't much in a party mood, so we did our usual. It's around 10:30 at night and the pizza joint is closing up for the night. There were 3 of us, me, my friend Pat, and my friend Jack. We finish our food, refill our drinks, and head out. To get back to my house, we had to cross this large mall parking lot that's about 4 football fields long and 2 wide. I should mention at this point that we aren't dumb, naive kids. We all had grown up in the city and had our fair share of urban experiences. All 3 of us were pretty streetwise and were pretty confident on the street by ourselves. But we experienced something this night that we were totally unprepared for. So, we're walking through this parking lot and it's absolutely desolate, not a soul in sight. Suddenly, we see a white tradesman van creeping slowly behind us about 100 yards back. I know the old white van cliche, but I swear it's a real story. I point it out to my friends and we pick up our pace. We pop the collars on our jackets and hunch our shoulders forward to make us seem a bit larger than we are. In an instant, the van speeds up and cuts off our path. Everything in the van is pitch black, so we can't see any people. That's when someone calls out in a non-threatening voice, "Hey man, happy Halloween. You guys like Halloween?" Despite the jovial manner in which this was said, a van doesn't cut you off in a parking lot unless it has bad intentions. We had nowhere to go. We could run, but they're in a van. They would catch up to us easily, and we would have to turn our backs to them. He says it again, "Hey man, you guys like Halloween?" I respond trying to sound tough, "Yeah, but it's over now, so we're heading home, and you're on our way." "Nah, dude, Halloween ain't over. We still got tons of candy in here." The tone suddenly shifted and still we can't see anyone in the van. The 3 of us puff out our chests and get ready for a fight. After a brief silence that felt like it dragged on for hours, Jack cuts the tension by sternly saying, "Listen, dickhead, I don't know what you think you're about to do, but if you don't leave, we're gonna kick your ass." Once he said that, the back door of the van swung open, and 2 very tall men stepped out. They had black suits with black leather gloves and were well built and strong looking. But the most menacing thing is they were both wearing these cheap Mitt Romney masks. That's when we realized this wasn't a Halloween prank. At that moment, all 3 of us went to take off, but the van started driving circles around us. There was no place for us to go. We had no idea what we were going to do to get out of the situation. I have no idea what these guys were planning to do to 3 18-year-old men, but they seemed like they knew what they were doing, and we were all getting ready for the fight of our lives. The van stopped and it looked like they were about to make their move. This was it. I mentioned that there were 3 of us that night. It was at that moment my other friend Pat, the one that had stayed silent up to this point, leaned into both of us and said, "This is a Hail Mary, but get ready to fucking run when I say go, alright?" He then picked up one of our sodas and threw it with all of his might at the driver's side window. The window was open and the cup maliciously connected with the driver's head. Pat screamed, "Run!" and we took off across the parking lot. The van squealed off in the other direction and we hurried our asses home. Jack and I were confused as to why a simple cup of soda got them to give up on their plans, Then we found out what actually happened. While we were panicking, Pat kept his cool. He nonchalantly dumped out his drink and slipped a big-ass rock into his cup. Then he waited for the right moment. The driver, thinking that this kid had just thrown a drink at him, wound up getting pegged in the head with the rock. It probably knocked him out cold, or it at least bought us enough time to put some distance between us. All of that was left after that was pulling off a miracle and getting the rock to hit. Maybe a guardian angel or God himself took care of that. I'm still amazed by it. Moral of the story, kids, don't panic when you're in a tough spot. If you lose your cool, you lose the fight. Joey Cabot sits crying on the small porch of his house. The light shines from behind him, hiding his small face in shadow. His sobs create puffs of steam in the chill late November air. He cries not from loss or the worn, splintered wood biting into his backside, but from abuse. You see, his father, Randall, is a drunk, a mean one. Tonight, it was a split lip and blackened eye for coughing during his TV dinner. Last week, it was a speck of food missed on the dishes. The light suddenly goes out, and Joey turns to see his father, Randall's face nearly touching the glass with a glare of drunken insanity that says, "If you like making sound, you'll stop making it, now." No question left in this message. In terror at the madness looking through the glass, Joey sprints away, the sudden massive intake of cold air stinging his lungs. Behind him, the door bangs open, and he realizes that if he doesn't get away, he'll die tonight. Tearing his way through the woods, Joey can hear his father's heavy, stumbling footfalls following. Luckily, Joey can navigate the woods much faster thanks to being small for a 9-year-old and not hopelessly drunk. The thorns and stickers of a bush cause him to cry out in fear as they snag his shirt. He feels no pain in this, only more terror as he hears Randall approaching quickly. Finally, breaching the woods, Joey enters the pumpkin patch. The scent of autumn and decaying squash fill his nose. His father yells in the woods, not having exited yet, but not far enough away for any comfort. Will any distance be great enough? He thinks absently. The thought causes him to softly chuckle, a dry, maddening sound that scares him even more. His run slows, muscle burning as the cold sinks in. Halfway through the pumpkin patch, he trips on a vine, his knee striking a rock, and he hits the ground. He cries out as blood begins to soak his torn jeans. "What do you fear, little one?" The voice paralyzes him. There is no echo, no direction, only the low, rumbling voice. "You are hurt." I fell," Joey says. He can feel that something is there, something is with him, and then feels its attention pulled away. "Joey, found you, boy!" From about 100 yards behind Joey, Randall, slick with sweat and dirt, stumbles forward. Joey begins to scramble backward, terror gripping him, but drunken determination makes Randall eerily fast, and the gap closes quickly. At 10 yards away, Randall stops, his foot seemingly caught in the decaying vines. As he tries to free himself, Joey sees another vine slowly wrap around Randall's left ankle. Randall pulls his right foot as hard as he can, but falls backwards, his balance compromised. Sitting up, Joey sees his father struggle, trying to rise, but vines gripping his wrists. "Help me, boy, get me loose," Randall pleads. Joey moves away. Randall has pulled this trick too often. "I'll kill you when I get loose, just like you killed your mama when you left her belly," Randall screams, his rage boiling over. As Randall struggles to free himself, a shifting sound grabs Joey's attention. A large pumpkin a few feet away gently rocks in the dirt. The shell splits and lengthens, and 2 protrusions pierce the top. 2 of the cracks open, a dark hollowness inside. And then, a very thin, small, brilliant orange light appears in each. The pumpkin slowly lifts on a neck made of vine, the jagged pumpkin shell mouth falling slightly open, bits of clinging root and fiber hanging out. The protrusions grow into magnificent, grotesque antlers, the sinuous guts of the pumpkin dangling from them. The mouth stretches until it seems like it stretched over the skull of a massive dog. Legs of vine pull from the dirt, followed by ribs, large haunches, and a tail. The skeletal form of the creature is the size of a cow, but distinctly canine in shape. It shakes, a cloud of dirt billowing out from its mane of matted roots that tapers down its back. The few green leaves on its tail stem and flutter. The creature looks at Joey, but while its disturbing eyes are filled with fury, somehow Joey understands that fury is not for him. As the creature turns its vengeful, piercing gaze, Randall finally realizes they are not alone. "What in the fuck is that?" he breathes. As the creature takes a step forward, Randall's eyes grow huge, the sobering realization of his mortality dawning. He screams and struggles, the vines cutting into his flesh as his bladder releases. The creature bides its time, moving slowly, seeming to relish in Randall's fear. Its head lowers, the antlers raking the dirt, plowing a series of symmetrical lines. In an almost ritualistic fashion, it circles Randall, leaving the plow marks in its wake. The creature then stands over Randall, regarding him. It is evident that it finds him wanting. "What are you?" Randall screams. "I am your winter." The beast lowers its antlers, pressing them slowly into Randall's chest. Randall never manages to scream. The rising is choked off by his blood. Joey wants to look away as the beast does its work, but finds he cannot. This creature is his savior. Its gnarled form twists and shakes free, Randall's blood appearing black in the moonlight. With a sudden stiff wind on the previously still night, the creature blows away into dust. Allison's favorite holiday was Halloween. Even at the age of 21, she never grew out of the Halloween spirit. She still dressed up in scary costumes, went to the pumpkin patch with her friends, and even enjoyed the horror movie marathons that played all October long. But this Halloween was a little different. Because of her demanding career in pharmaceuticals, Allison was now living in a small town in Pennsylvania that was over 2 hours away from her family and friends. That meant most holidays and birthdays she spent celebrating them alone. However, being the optimist that she proudly was, she decided that this Halloween she was going to thoroughly enjoy herself, despite being alone from family and friends. These were her exact thoughts that Halloween evening as she made her way up to her front door. Kids in costume were shouting for joy houses down as the neighbors handed out candy. Hurrying her pace, not wanting to miss the joy of giving candy out to the trick-or-treaters, Allison unlocked her front door and opened it. Before she stepped in, there, shoved under her welcome mat, was a white envelope. Curiously, Allison bent over and picked it up. There was no return address and only 2 words written on the front: "For Allison." Wondering who would have left this here, she tore open the envelope, pulling out the letter and began reading it. "Dear Allison, how are you? I hope all is well and you're enjoying your new home. I'll keep this brief because there isn't much time. Tonight, Halloween night, be sure by 10 p.m. lock all your doors and windows, and whatever you do not answer your door after 10 p.m. I don't care what you hear or what you think you hear, do not open your doors. Things beyond both of our comprehensions will occur, and you must not open the door at any cost. Please, heed my warnings. I only wish for your well-being. Be safe, stay strong, and do not open your door after 10 p.m. With love, your Aunt Cynthia." Allison read and reread the letter. She glanced up and down the street, trying to identify a prankster or mischief. She didn't have time to worry about this poor attempt at a cheap scare. Not only did she not have an Aunt Cynthia, but the trick-or-treaters were only 3 houses away, and she needed to prepare the candy bowl. It was her first Halloween in the neighborhood, and she wasn't going to be the neighbor who neglected the children their sugar rush. She made her way inside, her mind quickly occupied with the Halloween joy, trick-or-treaters, and a night of handing out candy. Any thoughts of the ominous warning and cheap scares were long gone. By 9:15 p.m., Allison's candy bowl was nearly empty. Despite being alone, she was having a great Halloween night. She bounced back and forth from answering the trick-or-treaters and watching the horror movie marathons on TV, while enjoying a glass of red wine. By 9:45 p.m., she decided to call it quits. There hadn't been a trick-or-treater for nearly an hour. This was a young neighborhood after all. Most of the kids were all sugared out and in bed. Plus, John Carpenter's Halloween was the next movie on TV, and she did not want to miss 1 second of that. She quickly got up and went to turn off her front porch lights, signaling to any other trick-or-treaters out there that she was closed for business. As she made her way to the front door, she noticed that it was 10 p.m. The letter's ominous warning came flooding back to her memory, but in her wine-induced state of being, she simply laughed at the poor attempt of a scare. As her hand went to the switch that would turn off her front porch lights, there was suddenly a knock at the door. "Trick or treat," Allison heard from the other side of the door. She reached for the knob and almost opened it. Almost. There was something odd about the voice, something off. Allison cleared her throat. "Sorry, all out of candy." She expected whoever was at the door to go away. What she did not expect was to see her doorknob begin to turn. She quickly turned the lock and slid the deadbolt across. "I said I'm all out of candy. I'm sorry, try another house." Silence hung in the air like a dense fog. "Allison, open the door." The wine buzz she was enjoying all night dissipated. She took a step back and pulled out her phone. "If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." There was another long, drawn-out pause. "Allison, we both know they can't help you." Her front door shook violently. The frame siding even began to splinter. Wood chips spilled to the ground. In a haste, she dialed 911. When she painstakingly explained her situation, that's when the violent attempt to break in ceased. There was an eerie calm. Allison sprinted into the kitchen and grabbed a steak knife. She opened her front door an inch to see if the maniac was still there. And that's when she saw the red and blue flashing lights. Cop cars and ambulances were scattered on the street and lawn of her next-door neighbor's house. She opened her door wider to analyze the situation. A cop came sprinting over to her. "Ma'am, please lock all your doors and windows and stay inside for the night." Allison obliged, but not before noticing that the officer's uniform was covered in dark red. She relocked her door and sat on her living room couch waiting for sleep to come. It never did. The next morning, the local news had answers to Allison's questions. The newscaster was calling it a Halloween massacre. Allison's next-door neighbors, the Doyles, were mutilated beyond recognition. They were a family of 6, a mom and a dad, 4 kids, all gone from this earth. What was worse, the newscaster explained that there was no fingerprints, no DNA, or any forms of evidence left behind. Just a family massacred with no explanation of how. Allison watched the news unfold throughout the morning, tears stinging her eyes. She scrambled through her kitchen trash until she found it, the letter left on her mat. She dialed her mother, burning with questions. "Do I have an Aunt Cynthia?" There was a pause. "Allison, is everything all right? Where's this coming from?" "Answer the question. Do I have an Aunt Cynthia?" Allison heard her mother gulp. "Technically, yes." "Who is she? Why have I never met her?" Her mother sighed. "Sweetie, Cynthia was my younger sister. When she was born, her neck caught around the umbilical cord. She suffocated." Allison froze to the spot, her aunt's letter in hand. That's when she noticed that there was more writing on the back that she hadn't noticed before. She turned the letter over and read, "Sweetie, there's always been good and evil on the earth. It's up to us to protect our loved ones from the evil. We've never met, not in this life, but I am the guardian of your life. That's what family does. Stay blessed, Allison, and stay safe." Allison folded the letter to her chest. Her Aunt Cynthia was her guardian angel. Oh, Halloween. What a season it is where every monster, creature, and deranged killer is celebrated. I do enjoy watching people in their costumes, as it's so different that you know it's just so much more fun. This year, I noticed people trying on costumes to look like me. And this surprised me because aren't they supposed to be wearing something scary and not someone like me? I find myself to be completely ordinary, and when I saw people wearing costumes to look exactly like me, I was taken aback a bit. People were scaring neighbors looking like me, and I never knew I was scary. Yes, I know my talking nose can be unnerving, and my black bleeding eyes can be harrowing, but it can't be that bad, can it? It was like looking into a mirror every time I walked down the street, and other people thought that I was another person wearing a costume to look like me. It felt so weird, and I didn't know whether I should feel great about this or not. Maybe I should have started a business where I sell costumes that look like me, and I'm at a loss. It's my image, and people should not look like me without my permission. The costumes are all well made to look like me, and the detail is spot on. Even the cuts on my hands where flies and insects can come in and out of. It can be disgusting, but people who love nature adore my hands, and even spiders sometimes go inside my hands to hide away when they feel afraid or too tired. They've even done my toe, where every hair on my toe is as hard as nails. It's touch cutting them all the time. They even got my mouth right, as my gums root out more tiny faces with teeth to bite food for me. And I am a nice person the majority of the time. It's just sometimes I do things which put me among the list of creatures and monsters where people then dress like me on Halloween. They even got the knife part right, as I have a few knives stabbed into me, and the costumes have pretend knives coming out of them. I was born with these knives stabbed into me from birth, and when a person pulls one out, he or she becomes my murderer. Until another knife grows out of me, I form an attachment to my killer, so to speak. The attachment ends in two parts where I eat them and then another knife grows out of me, and I must wait until another person pulls one out of me. Even when the people are dressed up to look like me, they also act like me. The way they knock on houses and say, "Pull a knife out of me, please." And at first, the homeowner is scared, but realizes it's not me and gives them sweets. I can't be that scary. I was just thinking about a very haunted area near where I grew up. I'm often homesick for the mountains and was reminiscing about one of the strangest things I had ever seen. When the old mining cemetery was open and you could drive up, we went there annually for Halloween night. There's a lot of lore, people seeing full-bodied apparitions and handprints appearing on the windshields if you drive up on a particularly foggy night. We took our annual trip up. This was about 2006. I remember it was clear as day. My dad's friend was running around with a cigarette, shaking branches to try and scare us. I was tough as nails, and he wasn't going to frighten me as the rest of the kids ran back to the car. I was standing there looking around at the old headstones and taking in the chilly night air. It was perfectly calm, and he walked up behind me, still smoking, and carrying on about how he could tell I was my father's daughter. As we were chatting, a white pickup pulled up next to our truck with the cab light on. The cemetery is on a hill, and we were about 100 feet up the hill, so I could see clearly into the cab. I couldn't see a driver. I said to my dad's friend, "Hey, who's driving that?" He said, "I don't see anyone in the cab." Me neither. My dad's friend looked extremely confused. I yelled down to my friends who was outside the truck to look into the window. How the heck did they pull in? I could see in the cab the entire time because of the light. She looked in, turned completely pale, and jumped in our truck. Both my dad's friend and I ran down the hill, and the truck slowly backed out and went back down the path. Cab lights still on, no one visible. I jumped in the truck and she was yelling. There was no one in there. Either this was the most elaborate redneck prank ever pulled off and someone hid it for 10 plus years, or I saw a ghost truck. In our area, news travels fast though, and I'm sure if some redneck rigged a self-driving pickup, it would have been news for days. It was Halloween, just getting dark. There would be no trick-or-treaters this year. I was leaving the porch light off. I just wasn't up to it. Lately, ever since the procedure, I'd been feeling either very peppy or very down. This is one of those down times. Larry was out, He does that sometimes, just goes to the bar and talks to random strangers. Personally, I don't see the point. You don't know them, and you won't know them after a drunken confession that they had a hit and run when they were 20, and they think about the kid every night. I mean, come on, who does that? Just go to the police and confess already. I was sitting in my chair watching my soaps. TiVo was great. I was trying to figure out which of the twin brothers the main character would fall in love with when the doorbell rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, I got up and peeked out the window. I got a glimpse of an absolute gruesome costume. Blood running down the little girl's face and clothes. I opened the door. No one there. Kid? Hey kid, where did you go? I stayed looking out the door for a sec, then yelled, "It's not even dark yet, and I'm not giving out candy anyway," I muttered as I closed the door. I got ready for bed, then lay there, aching a little. I tossed and turned, then I looked out the window. The kid was staring back at me, blood running down her face. I screamed and ran for the bathroom. I stood at the sink muttering, "It's just a kid, nothing to be afraid of." Finally, I mustered the energy to creep back to my room and lay down. A nap, that was just what I needed until the creepy trick-or-treaters went away. I lay in bed thinking. Finally, I drift off. I dreamed of things you won't allow yourself to think. I dreamed of blood, of screams, and an aching hurt. But there weren't any screams that day, were there? I didn't hear any anyway. I jolted awake, the screams echoing in my ears. I sat up. The girl was standing at the foot of my bed. I screamed for a second. But it was just a kid, right? Just a little girl. I held out my hands. "How the hell did you get in here?" She was quiet. "Listen, kid." I couldn't think of what to say. Suddenly, she opened her mouth, and I could see a knife slash that went halfway through her head. And all of a sudden, I was too scared to scream. "Mommy, why did you kill me?" I couldn't. "Mommy, why did you kill me?" "Because I love you," I whispered. "I couldn't take care of you. I didn't want you to live in this stupid world." She nodded, then smiled, like she understood something. Like she finally understood. Then she reached in her dress and pulled out a knife. "I love you too." My friend is a little different. Not in the sense that they aren't social or anything. No, they're different in another way. I first noticed it when we were hanging out, just playing video games at their house. I got hungry, so I asked if I could go get a snack. They said sure. I got up and went to the pantry, passing by a white door with a large steel lock, and scanned the small closeted area for some chips or something else to scarf down. On the way back to the living room, I could smell something emanating from the locked door. It smelled like chemicals and some sort of sweetness, not cotton candy, but I can't quite put my finger on what it was. Nothing like I've smelled before. I knew my friend's father was a doctor, so maybe it had something to do with his work. I went back to them and set the chips down, plopped on the floor next to them to continue playing. I forgot about the smell until a couple days later at our usual hangout spot by the high school we just graduated from. I asked them about it. "It's nothing much." My friend paused for a long while. "Just a room my dad keeps his chemicals in." It made sense at the time, and looking back, I shouldn't have dug any deeper. But the way they paused made me question if they were telling the truth. But the smell, it was so different. We had chemistry class together for 2 years, man. I've never smelled anything like that. "It's nothing," I told you. "My dad keeps it locked, so I don't even know what's all in there." "How's your dad been anyway? I haven't seen him in a while." "He's fine. He's just been stuck at work most of the day and night. Which reminds me, I have a shift in a couple of minutes. I gotta go. See ya." I tried to keep the smell out of my mind for the day, but it kept coming back to me. The sweet smell mixed with the chemicals had my curiosity bursting out of my body. I knew I had to find out what was in that room. I knew my friend would be working late that night, so I drove over to his house, no cars in the driveway. I wanted to make sure if they came home they couldn't tell if I was there, so I parked it about a mile away, on the outskirts of the woods that led to their house. I popped the trunk and grabbed my bolt cutters and a lock that looked at least similar to the one that was on the door. Hopefully my friend wouldn't notice. As I trudged through the woods, I came upon a small, crudely built wooden shack. A strange sight to see in the empty woods. I peered in and was shocked to smell the same smell from my friend's house. Animal skeletons strung on the wall along with bottles of liquid, chemicals. I picked up one of the bottles and to my surprise, the head of a squirrel floated to the top of the bottle, the same smell as before. As I left, I stubbed my toe on something by the door, dumbbells and weights. I hobbled my way to my friend's house and snuck in through the back. I heard something. I closed my eyes to try to hear better. A painful moan came from somewhere in the house. Weird. I made my way to the living room, and the painful moan switched to screaming. I wanted to run, but my body kept walking. I reached the living room, and a light illuminated the room. The television was on, because of course it was. And to top it with the cherry, the movie it played was Halloween. I switched the television off, but the painful moans continued elsewhere. The hair on my neck and arms stood up. I kept walking to the door and cut the lock. The smell had changed, stinkier, like rotten ham, and the chemical smell had become stronger. I pushed the door open. It creaked like a horror movie. Spooky. Completely dark, the smell hit me hard. It filled my nostrils and mouth. I could taste the chemicals. The moans continued from across the room. I stumbled around the room until I came to a wire that connected to a light bulb about halfway across the room. I pulled and the light filled the room. My God, the room. Blood was everywhere. The floors, walls, even the ceiling. A table next to me held a hacksaw and vials of chemicals. Blankets covered box objects. My initial reaction was to run and get as far away from my friend as possible. But I had to know what was under the blankets. I walked towards them and came to the first one in the corner of the room. The blanket had brown marks all over it, dried blood. I pulled off the blanket to find a woman's body decaying in a bathtub, the water still in it, causing her to become bloated. Her stomach had burst who knows how long ago, allowing her organs to spill over her legs. Parts of her skin had been taken off, like someone had been cutting them off. Bite marks filled her arms. Thank God her face was looking down. I don't know if I could have gone on if she was looking anywhere near me. I was stunned to see her, but I was knocked out of my trance when the moaning began again. A small table was next to another blanket. Drills and bottles of some sort of liquids toppled over on it. I tiptoed to the blanket, definitely the one the moaning was coming from. I pulled off the blanket and couldn't comprehend what I saw. A man. Well, what was a man? Nothing was human about him after whoever tortured him. A hole in his head exposed his brain, frothed with white foam. He bled from all orifices in the small box he was stuffed in. Not moving, but still moaning, he looked over at me with his cold eyes. His eyes were filled with small holes, presumably from the drills. He kept moaning like a madman. He too had parts of his skin missing and bite marks on him. He looked familiar but unrecognizable. There had to have been 12 cages with blankets over them in the room. Just how many people were in here? I had no more time for questions. A car sounded from the driveway. Quickly, I shut the door and turned off the light. I tried hiding underneath the table, but there wasn't enough space. The front door opened. I felt my way around, but there was nothing to hide under. The bathtub. Footsteps echoed in the living room. They were getting closer. On my way to the bathtub, I hit my side on the table. It shifted and the table made a squealing noise. Shit. I hurried over to the bathtub. Am I really about to do this? I stepped onto the woman's legs and laid down with her. Her body squelched and air escaped from her mouth onto my face. The smell overpowered me as I gagged and vomited onto my shirt. I moved to be as concealed as possible. I could feel her intestines on my neck and the water soak into my clothes. The footsteps came to the door as I closed the curtain to the bathtub, hopefully hiding me from whoever was coming in. Adrenaline pumped through my veins as the door opened. When the light flickered on, I looked up and saw the woman's face looking directly at me. Her eyes bulged out of her head and the blood vessels in her face had popped. Her pale skin made her look like a zombie. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I closed my eyes and listened. Nothing. Did they leave? Whoosh! The curtain slammed open and there he stood. My friend Dahmer. Taken from the weekly parent updates of Mr. and Mrs. Thomas and Ms. Engel, Damien Thomas's kindergarten teacher. 8:14. Damien is making lots of friends. He's very articulate for a boy his age. He makes an effort to talk to everyone, even the shy kids. 8:28. Damien has an imaginary friend. I noticed him talking to the air beside him, though he stops when I remind him to pay attention. An active imagination is a good thing, so I don't want to discourage it. I'm sure we'll find a balance between playtime and school time. 9:11. Damien is exhibiting excellent leadership skills. He takes initiative when we break into smaller groups, and he volunteers to do little things around the classroom. The other children listen when he offers ideas, and he's very good at organizing group games. They are definitely qualities we should nurture. 9:27. I wanted to update you on a minor behavioral issue we discussed earlier. Damien promised to stop hiding drawings around the classroom, but I found several more. I'm not sure if they're from before my talk with him, but I wanted to let you know. They're much of the same. Stars, scribbles, patterns inside circles. They're very intricate for a child his age, but finding them unexpectedly is disruptive. I'll keep you updated if I discover any more. 10:2. Damien has a new nickname. The children have started calling him Dominus. I asked Damien where the name come from, and he said his imaginary friend gave it to him. I asked what his imaginary friend's name was, but he said it was a secret. Is it possible Damien got this name from a movie? His imagination is growing by the day. 10:16. Damien seems to be at the center of a new game. During recess, the kids all form a circle with him in the center. They repeat some kind of rhyme, but I haven't been able to hear it as they stop when I or another adult get close. Has Damien spoke to you about this? I don't think he's being made fun of, but I don't want to stand idle if there's bullying going on in my classroom. 10:30. Damien has been very involved with the Halloween activities we've done this week, and he's very excited about the Halloween festival the school is hosting tomorrow. He even says he and the rest of the class have a surprise for me, and I'll finally get to meet his imaginary friend. Isn't that sweet? I suspect it has something to do with the circle they've drawn on the playground. Damien embellished it with his scribbles. I'm so proud he's internalized the difference between school time and playtime. I hope you're both proud as well. As you can tell by the title, I live alone. Well, I thought I lived alone. I live in the woods in my state and haven't had visitors at all in my trailer since the housewarming. But despite having the place to myself, I often would find things moving around, like a dish in another room or a light that I thought I'd turned off, on, things like that. Due to my hectic work schedule, I simply just thought I misremembered it. One day a friend of mine and I was talking about this thing in casual conversation. He said to me that he had some surveillance technology he could let me borrow and look into it. I think he's overly paranoid, but I humored him, so I said, sure, as long as you keep all the things you see on those tapes solely between you and me for now. He nodded and laughed a bit. The next day after work, I went to his truck and he gave me the tech, told me how to set everything up and the like. I went home and assembled it to his specifications. Cameras in every room of the house that gave optimum viewing space. Now, you may wonder why I told him straight that things stayed between us and he joked about it with me. Well, I harbor a little relishing secret in my place. Nothing serious, like I wasn't a war criminal from over in Afghanistan or I have a meth lab in the basement. I have a very eccentric hobby, if you will. I collect toys. Not just any children's toys. I collect the expensive toys that men usually buy that look like women and is made of rubber and plastic. I'm not ashamed of my toys, but I know in some circles they aren't exactly an easy conversation topic. A lot of people think I'm psychotic for having them around. You try dealing with people that only let you down for all of your life and getting the raw deal every interaction with people in your social life. So, a couple weeks go by and he says he sees nothing off-putting in the tapes yet. For some reason, he never brought up the toys since I know he doesn't know I have them. I have a collection of 5 now, soon to be more. I haven't noticed anything out of the ordinary besides the unusually high amount of dead mice in my house. My place has been known to get a collection of animals, mice, ants, and a snake in the house somewhere. But nothing of those sizes would be able to move the human objects or sentient enough to turn off and on the lights. Anyway, I forgot about the whole ordeal until I noticed after being out during the night at a local bar with some buddies from work hustling a game of pool. I saw a decoration in the living room. It was the Grim Reaper animatronic I was planning on working on for the next Halloween season, fully assembled and working. I thought I had a bit too much to drink and I decided to sleep in my van in the back of the vehicle, locking myself in until I could get over my hangover. The next morning as the sun hits my eyes, I managed to get out of the van and went back into the house. The Reaper was gone, back in the basement like I had it, needing to be repaired. What the feck did I drink last night? No more Coronas on Fridays anymore, I said as I headed to take a shower. My phone was ringing as I entered the shower. I'll get their voicemail after this, I thought. After I took my time in the shower and freshened up, I checked my phone. It was Jeff, the guy who loaned me the tech. I checked my voicemail and he sounded frantic on the phone, saying some sketchy shit is going down and I needed to get the hell out of Dodge and meet at his place. I called him back. Hey, Jeff, I just got your voicemail. I'll be right over. I think you had a bit too much by the sounds of it. I saw some freaky stuff last night. We probably saw the same thing, I said and grabbed my keys. Jeff is a man in his 50s. He's a conspiracy theorist and loves to relish in the macabre and scary theories about everything from the royal family in the UK to the programs our kids watch on TV. So I expected to hear some crackpot theory about how death is haunting the premises because some Indian died on that plot of land and the whole gamut. This better be serious, Jeff, I said as he let me in. It is. You better sit down when you see this, he said as he led me to the control room where all the tech is taped. The footage is grainy and has a greenish tint with the night vision he downloaded to the cameras. Just a normal Friday night, Jeff. Nothing kooky yet. Until you get here, he said as he fast-forwarded the tape. I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw my dolls, for all's sake argument, moving. I have no idea why they could do that. They weren't capable of that type of activity, especially their hands made of wire and plastic. They had a tight grip on the decoration. It appeared like they were talking, chanting at times as they assembled it in the living room. Then I saw it. I saw the thing that was behind their eyes move. It seeped out of their mouths and went into the Grim Reaper. An unfurling fire surrounded the 6 of the toys that didn't burn the place. Death comes for us all, I heard on the tape. I jumped back, as did Jeff. That wasn't there before, he said. We will kill and make you like us, the amalgamation said over the tape. What the feck, I asked. Suddenly I cut into frame. This must have been when I got home, I said. The dolls were no longer there and the fire dissipated when the door swung open. I could see my own bewilderment and disbelief and hurrying back outside. Jeff paused the tape. You have a spirit in there, he said. No shit, Sherlock, I retorted. What can I do about this? I don't know. I've never had any of my theories ever come close to being reality. I guess try to make peace with it. Make peace with it? It wants to kill me, Jeff. I know. Maybe make dinner for your toys and see if the spirit will dissipate. I have no feckin' clue what to do. Okay. Now here I am, planning my next movements. I'm going to make dinner for a demonic entity that wants to kill me. I hope that this actually works. I don't think even my pastor will believe this for something outside of a movie. I'm writing this down now for the online community, for if the amalgamation consumes me, you know what happened. My coordinates are 42.4338 degrees north, 83.9845 degrees west. I see my pastor just reached out to me now. Maybe I have a chance if my dinner date isn't the death of me. For those uninitiated to the story, I live alone, or I thought I did. I noticed stuff in the house moving, like plates in different places or lights I had off turned on when I came home. A friend of mine, Jeff, who insisted on checking out the activity in the house, decided to do surveillance. What he found shocked him and me. I have an amalgamation in my house that wants to kill me and make me possess one of my toys, or that Grim Reaper animatronic I saw in my drunken stupor. Where we left off, I was forged with the task to figure out what the amalgamation wanted. So I made a dinner date with the devil, or I guess demons. I finally cranked on the stove, which I hadn't touched in ages since I moved into the place. I made a crispy duck and mashed potatoes with rice and broccoli. A dessert of no-bake Oreo pie with an assortment of fine and expensive wine. This is fucking stupid, I thought as I finished setting up the dinner table. I got my dolls all around the table with an empty chair on the end of the table, with the other end open for myself. There's no way this will work. This thing wants to have me for dinner, not have dinner with me, I thought, feeling like a fool, knowing that Jeff is watching this as we speak. We had made arrangements for him to watch this so he can find out what to do next with the entity, if I could summon him or her or it. My phone had given off text notifications. Who is it now? I asked and looked at the phone. It was Jeff. Make sure to light the taper candles and dim the lights. I read the notification on my lock screen. What is this, a seance? I thought, and grabbed the taper candles from the closet in their respective holders. I had to chuckle at the thought of it. This has to be a movie plot. I can only imagine that at one point the camera crew is going to come in and you'll hear someone yell, "Cut! End scene!" I laughed and then paused. Wait, who the feck is...
It's me, Legion.
The voice boomed in a dark demonic tone like in the tape. I turned and looked around the room. I saw no one or nothing move. I'm not even drunk yet, I thought, and was milling around a bit over the last minute stuff before I sat down. Okay, I think I have everything. Duck is cooked crisp and prime. I have the food properly set out and arranged, and the plates are set up with the proper dinner time setup for cutlery. The wine is out and on ice in a bucket. I have the candles set up and the book of matches in my...
Stop stalling and sit down so we can eat. I haven't ate this good since the 18th century.
Okay, let me light these. I sigh.
Fine, and turn off the lights.
Okay, thanks for being patient. I'm talking to the voices in my house. I must be losing it, I thought, and shook my head. Dinner was largely uneventful at least. No dolls moving autonomously or the candles exploding. I had my eyes on the food and relishing it. Man, I outdid myself, I said and smiled. I looked up at the table, not expecting anything of value given the past 20 minutes. At the end of the table, I saw a thing in the chair. I'll describe it in detail. This entity was a shadow. Like I know it's dark in the house, but the candles couldn't even light up the chair anymore. I only knew something was there because it was eating. It was eating. I watched it pick up some of the rice with a spoon, and it went into the entity where its mouth should be, and the rice was gone. I couldn't believe my eyes. The entity had a shadowy aura, and I could feel its eyes piercing me. It was eyeing me up like a predator leers at its prey. You're staring at me, right? I asked.
Now, Staring is rude, but you do look delicious.
I shuddered. What do you want from me? Silence surrounded me. I paused and drank some of the wine. Nothing. I looked at the chair. The entity had left for some reason. Fine, leave me in suspense, I said a bit timidly. I think the entity was wearing Victorian-era clothing, but I couldn't confirm it. I'm speculating based on what it said about the century. I bet I could see it on the tape, I thought, and kept eating my dinner. After the dinner and putting it away, I texted Jeff. Did you see the entity? Yeah, he texted back. What did it look like? It looked like Jack. Our coworker Jack? I texted. I asked, surprised. Why would he prank us? No, Jack the Ripper, from the Whitechapel area in London. You know, the killer no one could confirm their identity? I laughed. Jack the Ripper? You know how crazy that sounds. Do you want to see the tapes or not to prove it? He asked in a text. I could sense his anger behind that question. I wanted to view the tape anyway. I texted him back. Aside from the zany conspiracies Jeff has had, Jack the Ripper? There is no way this entity is a Victorian-era serial killer. A book fell in the living room, causing me to jump in my skin. I walked over, putting my phone in my pocket. I saw the title of the book and caused me to jump. The Crimes of Jack the Ripper, The Whitechapel Murders Re-Examined by Paul Rowland. I looked into the Ripper back when I was a kid, and I have quite a collection of books about it. I know some people look at these as a career in finding out who done it. I think the term is Ripperology in that circle of the community. I wonder if maybe this entity is toying with me. I mean, there is no way Jack the Ripper is alive, still in the modern day era, over 180 years later. No way in the British Isles. At Jeff's place, I walked in, holding the book from my house. I thought you didn't believe me, he asked, a bit resentful and mockingly. Just so you know, I think it's silly, but I looked into the Ripper when I was in high school and my early adult years, I retorted. Just show me the tape. Okay, he said as we went to the surveillance room. He had it paused to right when we started eating. I watched the video of me eating, and then I saw a mist enter the screen from the side where the empty chair was. A cloud of darkness descended from above on the chair, and I saw the figure sitting. He wore a top hat and a frilly white shirt, like the shirt Seinfeld wore in that Puffy Shirt episode. He had a double-breasted vest on, and long black-looking pants with platform shoes, and a long trench coat draped on the back of the chair, and a cane at his side leaning in between his leg and the arm of the chair. How do you explain that then? He asked and tapped the screen. I stood there taking it all in. That is Jack the Ripper, he said and tapped the screen with every single word.
Don't tap the glass.
I heard the entity scream as the head suddenly turned to look at us. Me and Jeff jumped back in fear. Feck, I almost shat myself, I said with intense trepidation in my voice. That wasn't supposed to happen, Jeff said. The scene resumed with the entity eating his dinner and me eating my dinner, and the conversation I had with the entity carried on like it happened at my place. Then I saw the entity put his coat on, grab his cane, and fade through the chair, vanishing off screen when I asked if he wanted something from me. So what does Jack the Ripper want from me that ties into murdering me and making me look like one of them? I asked, saying the last words in air quotes. Jeff had looked puzzled. I truthfully am just as dumbfounded as you are. I don't recall if Jack the Ripper had any unsolved business in his murder spree in England. And also, it does seem weird that he emerges just months after England's Queen Elizabeth II dies. Almost as if something in the family is holding Jack in limbo for those 70 years. So you think the royal family is involved now too? I asked and eye rolled. Don't you look at me like that. I was right about the dinner date at least, but I think an exorcism isn't out of the question, Jeff said. I guess I gotta hit the books again about the Ripper and look into his crimes. Hopefully this little insanity doesn't make me go crazy, I said, and had started to head out of the door.
Come back soon. I do wish you to check in on him.
I heard the voice growl and look back at Jeff. Did you hear that? I asked. He looked at me confused. Hear what? Jeff said. I paused. Never mind, I said and walked out. See you at work tomorrow, I called out. Now, I'm going back to school, hitting the books to see what Jack the Ripper did and has been rumored to have done. Maybe this will provide some answers. Oh, let's have another dinner date soon. I'm dying to get to know you more, my most relished host. As for now, I will read into the Ripper and see if the tape will provide some answers, and some relief at least for me and the rest of us in here. Until next time, see you souls soon and we'll keep you updated. So far I have noticed stuff moving in the house. One night an animatronic I had been working on was working and assembled, which wasn't humanly possible. My one coworker, Jeff, had ended up doing some paranormal investigation, and we discovered that an entity called the Amalgamation has had residence in my flat for a while. I ended up making dinner for the Amalgamation. As we shared in the meal, we both think that the entity possessing the flat is the real Jack the Ripper. So I've been looking into the case of Jack the Ripper and the Canonical Fives case. In my research, I've learned that the fog we associate in London during the epoch was not more so caused by the canal like I thought, but the machine factories produced that fog. And the police records were often tossed out after a period of time, and there was a fire in London that affected the police dispatch, charring additional records which furthered them never pinning the Ripper onto anyone. But I digress. As for the supernatural experiences I've been seeing shadowy figures in front of me dart to and through in the early hours in the morning. These figures were about 2 foot tall and lanky. They moved similar to the shadow in Peter Pan's story that Pan chased after when he met with Wendy, which was funny as it occurred initially over the London area, I believe in the story. Sometimes I come home with lights on when I swore I turned them off. Sometimes maybe my imaginings mislead me in the case of the occasional light turned on or the door open when I thought it was shut. I've also had some rather distressing dreams. Maybe having a hearty drink before bed may not be the best. At least my body doesn't reflect a thin and lean complexion anymore like I had in my youth and young adult years. But all my dreams that distress me have one thing in common: the man. The man I saw at the dinner table. I thought only Freddy Krueger haunted dreams, but this man had nothing on him. Sometimes I think the man has lurked in my dreams to watch my mind run amok in terror and fear. Let me tell you about a dream I had way back when. But this time, as I remembered it, I saw something I neglected to see in previous reflections. I have a journal that I write my feelings and thoughts in, so I could reflect and cherish my memories for the future. It is very therapeutic for me. While no human contact may pick at my brain, my memories lay out on display for one to see if they were to peruse my journal, with my permission obviously. I also recorded the dream in there as well. Forgive me if I misspell or speak in a rigid sentence structure. I've been finishing a bottle of vodka, so I may buy more liquor later. In July, I wrote this down. I had a dream that the police were in a game of cat and mouse with me. Reminds me of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, where Raskolnikov and Petrovich go back and forth. They want my journal, or likely journals, as evidence. That, and they said the government authorities needed to look at it. I ended up telling a detective to meet me in the woods by the creek bank where the old bridge was. After another chase, I was in the old house in the forest. It had a light green glow and people were sitting with me. At last, the squad came. I must have been chased by a police squad. I handed the journal over, and instead of arresting me, they ended up putting a type of acid over me, and I started to dissolve. I felt all of it. Man, I guess when you feel pain in the dream, it does involve your senses. Suddenly, the room had a very deep blue glow, and I saw a weary man sitting in a nice upholstered Victorian chair. Victorian? Man? In my previous viewing, it was always a woman. I went to get up from my chair and I saw my soul leave my body. I died and saw a glimpse of the afterlife. Oh yes, I remember saying to people it all went black before the alarm went off. That it felt like the aura of Tim Burton's corpse bride in the tonal collar in the dream. I also went further on to see what I assumed my dream meant based on the things that occurred in my life and that moment. I remember seeing this man in other dreams, like in my dreams about work, often as a customer, or in my dreams when I am out and about as a person in the crowd. I decided to go to the therapist with my dream and my journal. My therapist is very empathetic and a smart man. He understands me and why I live alone. He also knows of my 5 dolls and thinks having them is beneficial more than causing harm to my life. My therapist had looked at my journal and my dream passage, and when I asked if he saw a man sitting in the chair, he said no. He says I wrote a woman sitting in the chair. So I told him everything about the man in my dreams and my experiences with the paranormal. For sake of the story, I will call my therapist Lucas. Lucas also attends the same church I do. So that is a fun little tidbit that doesn't pertain to the story as of right now. It would pertain to future entries. Lucas, despite having a Christian background, in our sessions is very willing to understand and be raw in how we interact without making me censor myself. Lucas asked me, "So, who do you think this man is?" I'm not sure. He isn't like anyone I've met in my life, in my jobs. I have seen him in my dreams before. They say our dreams are our subconscious working out our unhandled issues. Perhaps this man represents something you feel like you're struggling with in regards to masculinity or things of that nature. So, you think my mind is trying to process the issues I face with men? I don't have a lot of guy friends, but I don't think that is an issue, right? It very well could be, or it could be not. Maybe this man in your dreams is another side of you, since you've seen him a lot in your dreams and can't place him. So you think I'm the man? I asked, puzzling the conversation in my head. But how would that explain the supernatural experience with the animatronic and possessing the dolls and the audible voice and the entity? Look, my job is to help you find yourself. You're a very smart man. I'm sure you'll figure it out on your own. Maybe the spiritual side of our world is very visible to you, like seeing the 4th man in the furnace with Rack, Shack, and Benny. A VeggieTale reference? Okay, I thought to myself. So, like an angelic figure? Not necessarily. Even though angels are portrayed as visible to mankind, it is very likely a demonic entity could resemble a person to mankind, despite being initially portrayed as a serpent in Genesis 3. The closest thing that men end up experiencing in regards to demons is in cases of possessions and exorcism. Never just an entity without possessing a host body. Okay, so odds are what is in my flat isn't Jack the Ripper? Probably, but odds are likely not the actual Jack the Ripper. Well, there goes my research into the case for now, I thought to myself. Okay, thank you, Lucas. I'll have a look into it. I just wonder why the Victorian personal flair to the entity. I mean, it's an outlier to the whole case if it isn't Jack the Ripper, I said as I stood up from the chair. Knowing you and your taste for the eccentric, if this is part of you, maybe this is a way for you to still be authentic and true to your darker self. If this entity is you versus something else. So now I wait. Every night I sleep wondering when this man will show up. It is getting late here as I write this, and I still have half a glass of vodka to drink down. My eyelids are getting heavy. I look over to the living room where my 2 giant girls are waiting, and I swear I see a pair of eyes reflecting, watching me just around the corner. I probably have had too much to drink, but the thought continues to haunt me. What if this entity is me, or a part of me? Am I going to last, or is this going to eat me from the inside out? Jonathan worked furiously to finish etching in the last of the symbols before sunset. For someone who had practiced the ritual plenty of times, he continued to make the rookie mistake of waiting till the last minute to undertake the task. The truth of the matter was, he dreaded this day each year. In the beginning, it had been an interesting undertaking, but the thrill had faded a long time ago. The sheer amount of work combined with the mess it created to craft the totem had become more trouble than it was worth. As he carved the last of the symbols into the side of the jack-o'-lantern, he questioned if it was even worth finishing. That is, until he noticed the shadow out of the corner of his eye. One of the elder beings, no doubt coming to see if Jonathan would uphold his part of the bargain for another year. Its presence alone was enough to give him the drive required to finish the task. Anxiety crept through his limbs as he dropped the knife before frantically wiping his wet hands on his clothes. He began to tremble in fear as he desperately searched for the lighter he had set down earlier. Thankfully, he quickly found it and lit the small wick placed inside the body of the totem. "There," he screamed. "I've done it. It's finished." The shadow glared at him before slowly moving back, disappearing into the dark of the room. Jonathan shook his head before turning his attention back to the jack-o'-lantern, eyeing it with disgust. He had completed another ritual, and thus he was given another year of life. However, after doing so 304 times prior, this would be his final undertaking. Come next year, he would not carve another jack-o'-lantern, and the elder beings would finally have him. This would be Jonathan's last year on Earth, and more importantly, that meant he had sacrificed his last child to prolong his existence. Let's start off with some updates. All but one of the holes are gone now. There's no sign of them ever having been there anymore. Dead animals are still a regular thing, and the tenant in the bungalow completely lost his mind. The tenant was an older man but seemed to be in good shape both mentally and physically. But a month after that thing killed his dog, I received a call from the tenants in the house that he was shooting his gun inside of the bungalow. The cops ended up being called and he was taken from the premises, wound up being put in a home. He has been diagnosed with dementia. He did a lot of damage to the bungalow, bullet holes, writing on the wall, including with poop. I'm oddly convinced it's not all of his own, and rigged all the windows with DIY makeshift traps. Hunting that thing had consumed his life since I last saw him. He claims that thing was living in the attic and the basement. There is no attic or basement, and would regularly mock him. His family moved out most of his stuff, but left me with some of his possessions, including a few guns. He gave me the paperwork so they are now in my name. A few chairs, hunting gear, and a lot of lamps. That pretty much catches you up on the events until yesterday, and now. I hope this post isn't too disorganized. I'm writing the events of yesterday and today without taking any time to think things through and process everything that has occurred. But here I go. I showed up yesterday and visited with the tenants in the house. They were as friendly and generous as ever. They even gave me next month's rent already and offered me to come over for dinner. But unfortunately, this is actually a business trip. I need to repair the bungalow so that it can be rented again. Helpful as always, the man offered to help, and I initially refused, but then he offered some of his good quality herbs while we work. I could not refuse. We spent all night last night cleaning the walls. We got a lot done and things were uneventful. He let me know he disarmed all the traps and told me about how the poor man spiraled after I had last seen him. At the end of the night, he offered me to come over to dinner again and offered to watch some scary movies to celebrate Halloween. But I need to get this work done so I can get back to my work on Monday. Today, I awoke to the sound of scratching and footsteps, neither of which had a source. Dead cat on the doorstep. It's less creepy now and more of a nuisance. I wasn't able to celebrate the holiday, unfortunately, but I did fix all the flooring and boards the previous tenant had shot up. I occasionally heard things I could not find a source for and occasionally found myself wondering if things were where I left them. It's night now, and I keep hearing noises, constantly. Above me, below me, in the room with me, but nothing to cause them. I think it's that damn thing. It's here now. I am sure of it. I don't know what it wants, but it won't leave me alone. I found a shotgun in the stuff my former tenant's family left me. I'm considering going out there to hunt that damn thing. I think I'm going to call him or her Samuel. Yeah, it's Halloween, so why the hell not, Samuel? Don't judge me, damn it. That last bit there, I went a little off the rails a bit. I tried to delete it, but I must have typed it again. No, someone else must be in here with me, typing when I'm not looking. Sam, maybe? Nah, that's crazy and makes no sense whatsoever. All that scratching is definitely getting to me. I can't seem to delete it. It just keeps getting typed again. So many strange things have happened here, and not just in the bungalow. It's like when I moved away, something strange moved in. No, that's not right either. There's a rational explanation for all of this. I just don't know what it is. Stop that damn scratching! I didn't type that either, but it does accurately represent how I'm feeling at the moment. I know I'm alone in here. I've checked repeatedly, and there's no one or thing here, but that scratching won't stop, and someone keeps typing while I'm not looking. I don't believe in the supernatural. This can all be explained, but so many strange things, the typing, the scratching, Sam, the graves in the woods. I've been staring at that last sentence for the last 5 minutes now. I meant to write holes, but it says graves. I deleted it and retyped it several times, spelling it out as I did it. H-O-L-E-S. But I kept getting graves. Am I losing it? I'm going to have a drink and calm down now. I'll type more when I'm calm and maybe that scratching has stopped. There is nothing supernatural. There is nothing supernatural. There is nothing supernatural. That cheating whore. I found my chair with that damn lamp on top of her. That is my chair and he can't have her. Is the last grave for me? I shot that damn lamp and threw the cheating chair into the dark of the forest. I took the bulb out of that bastard lamp and planned to bury him with whatever gift Sam brings me in the morning. Stop scratching, Sam! My clothes were making scratching sounds, so I drowned them in the toilet with the barracuda. Damn it. The chair. She called the cops on me. Stupid fucking loose chair. I hear the sirens. I see lights flashing. This is my property. I won't let them have it. I must go. Must get rid of trespassers. The date was October 15, 2022. A high school senior at Cabrillo High was stressing over an essay that his teacher given him 2 weeks ago. "Marco," the teacher shouted. "The essay is due tomorrow morning, and I'm not accepting it late," the teacher shouted again. Marco was never a bad student, but he was usually goofing around in the corner of class with his best friend when he should be working, which is always done when the teacher collects it surprisingly. "Yeah, don't worry about it, mister. I'm going over to Johnny's house to finish it up tonight," Marco said with a goofy grin on his face while he nudged his elbow into Johnny's side. Johnny is Marco's best friend of 5 years, ever since Johnny transferred to Marco's middle school in the 8th grade. "Yeah, right. More like I'll be finishing my essay while you procrastinate," Johnny said with a sly smirk on his face. School went on and the rest of the day went normal. Marco had baseball practice after school and Johnny was in the school newspaper, but they took a week off to get ready for Halloween, so Johnny decided to go straight home. After baseball practice, Marco got onto his skateboard and took off to Johnny's house, which is 2.5 miles away from the school, but it was pretty dark out. Marco made it around the corner of Johnny's place, and saw that there weren't any cars in the driveway, so him and Johnny would have the place to themselves for a while. Marco saw that all the lights were off in the house and was starting to get confused. While Marco was taking out his cell phone to call Johnny, he heard what sounded like wood creaking in the backyard of the house, and Marco knew it was from the treehouse. Johnny's dad had built it for him during the summer of that 8th grade. Marco went around the corner of the house and saw that the treehouse lamp was turned on, so he made his way to the ladder and saw that no one was up there, only Johnny's backpack and a kicked-over chair and table. Marco was starting to get worried for his friend until he heard commotion in the house, so he turned around and saw Johnny standing in his room looking out the window. Even though it was dark, Marco was able to see that Johnny was covered in dirt and mud and what looked like blood running down his face. Marco jumped in shock but then quickly started laughing. Him and Johnny were always pulling pranks on each other ever since middle school, but they would always go all out on Halloween trying to scare the life out of each other. After Marco finished his laugh, he walked to the front door and was waiting for Johnny to come down and unlock it for him. Not even a minute of waiting, Johnny's parents pulled up into the driveway. "What are you doing here, Marco?" Johnny's mom asked with confusion and worry in her voice. "Waiting for Johnny to open the door. He just played his Halloween prank on me dressed like a dead person," Marco said with a little bit of joy in his voice, remembering the scare from a few seconds ago. "But the doors were never opened? We never got a notification from the home app that Johnny made it home. We thought he was at your house," Johnny's father said. Marco's heart dropped. Ever since I was a child, I have been terrified of werewolves and wolves as well, especially movies about them. And as a kid, I was crazy enough to watch them. But I covered my eyes whenever I knew the scary wolf was going to appear. So this obviously gave me terrible nightmares for most of my life. It was a Friday on Halloween night, my favorite holiday, 2016. At the time, I worked as an English teacher in a company I always thought did not appreciate me. On that night, I was planning to watch a horror movie marathon like I did every year. However, I was thinking about watching a werewolf movie that year, but one of my coworkers recommended me an old movie called An American Werewolf in London. It sounded scary, but I really wanted to face my fears and give it a shot. On that day, I was very excited because I had already bought candy for the trick-or-treaters and some beer for me, but I wished I did not have to work until 5 p.m. So as soon as I got off work, I took my things and left my office. I drove my car home, which I called the Batmobile, to execute my plans. I listened to a song called Thriller, which I loved listening to on Halloween nights. I got home at 7 p.m. or so, then I took a beer from my fridge, drank a long sip and heard the doorbell ring, which scared me for a second, but then I heard "trick or treat" behind my door. So I opened it, complimented the kids' cool costumes, and gave them candy. The trick-or-treaters kept visiting me until 8 p.m., and all the while I listened to heavy metal and ate ramen for dinner. After that, I grabbed my laptop and watched my horror movie marathon, and I left the werewolf movie for last. I sometimes had to pause to get another beer, and it scared the crap out of me, but I still thought it was a great movie. So I was 6 beers in and decided to go to sleep at midnight. That night, I had a terrible nightmare where I had to run away from a werewolf in a dark and foggy and creepy forest, which was only lit by the moon. In my dream, I was screaming my lungs out and I felt extremely disoriented and afraid of the huge, bulky, black-as-night werewolf that was chasing after me. I ran for my life for what seemed like hours, but I felt the beast closing in on me. I turned around several times and I could see that its dark silhouette, bright red eyes, and yellow teeth bearing at me. Then I screamed once again and ran a bit faster now. Out of the blue, I came across a huge fallen tree that had blocked my way, so I had no choice but to jump over it. I heard the werewolf growling and panting behind me, so it jumped the tree too. While I was still mid-air, I felt a sharp pain in my back, and I woke up suddenly. Then I jumped out of my bed from fright, hit my body against the floor and cursed. I rubbed my eyes, got up slowly. Out of nowhere, I felt a sudden and strong pain on my back, just like in my dream. I tried reaching for the place where I felt the pain, but I could not reach it. So I went to the bathroom, washed my face, drank a little tap water, saw myself in the mirror, turned around, and to my horror, I saw 5 deep, bloody gashes on my back. I jumped forward and said, "What the hell is that?" The next day, I went to the hospital and got my wounds patched up. I simply lied to the doctor and said my cat had scratched me while I was sleeping. I obviously did not own a cat. To this day, I still ask myself if this was just a crazy dream, or did my terrified mind somehow make it a reality? Who knows? The truth is, I never watched a werewolf movie again, since I was terrified that I might have another nightmare as vivid and terrifying as that one. Patrick was incredibly excited to have his girlfriend Alice move in. They had been dating for about a year, and they felt it was finally time. Things had been going exceptionally well. They quickly became inseparable, and talk of the future had been occurring. The one thing that always stuck out to Patrick, though, was the nightlight. Alice always had a nightlight on at night. Her place, his place, while sleeping, making love, always the nightlight was on its full, brilliant glory. He had tried to shut it off once when he couldn't sleep, and Alice had become panicked, saying she needed it on, that she was scared. He hadn't brought it up since. Her security overshadowed any inconvenience for him. The first few weeks were amazing, relaxing after work together, cooking together, even grocery shopping was better. And every night, when they went to bed, the nightlight's soft yellow glow emanated from the corner. Until the storm came, that is. The storm came through one evening and knocked out the power to Patrick's apartment building. Alice immediately panicked. "Patrick, I need the nightlight. You don't understand," she cried. "I know I don't. It's going to be okay. I'm going to be with you all night," he replied, gently rubbing her upper back. "We could leave a flashlight on if you think that will help." She looked at him, calming but sniffing, and nodded before hugging him. Before bed, Patrick stood the flashlight on its end on his nightstand, its light reflecting off the ceiling. "Are you sure it's going to last all night?" asked Alice. Patrick looked from her to the flashlight. "I think so." "I hope so." Alice trailed off. She fidgeted, still unsettled. Slowly, Alice drifted off to sleep. Patrick found, however, he could not rest. The flashlight was brighter than the nightlight, and his fan was off. This is going to be a long night, he thought to himself as he laid there. He looked to the flashlight briefly, thinking about turning it off, but immediately refused the idea for the woman he loved so dearly. Turning to look at her, he smiled. She was so peaceful, and despite her fear, felt safe. An hour of staring at the ceiling passed before Patrick realized something was wrong. The light was dimmer and fading quickly. He turned and shook the flashlight, a couple of bright flashes coming, but it continued to go out. As the last of the light faded, Patrick gently sighed, defeated. He would do his best to console her if she woke up in the night. He rolled over to face her, her face now bathed in shadow. He studied her face in the darkness. Now, only the dim light of distant streetlights providing the faintest light through the window behind him. His eyes adjusted as he looked at Alice, her skin showing a pale blue. Her eyes, however, appeared deeply obscured in darkness, dark blues fading into blackness. It was vaguely haunting to see her like this. A sudden awareness snapped him out of his thoughts. Her eyes weren't closed anymore. A knot began to slowly form in his stomach. A deep feeling of dread from the primal regions of Patrick's brain screamed that something is wrong. Alice's eyes slowly moved to meet his, the gaze feeling predatory. Her mouth opened, a seemingly bottomless void rimmed with fangs, and a broken, crackling screech emanated from it. Patrick pushed himself backward, tumbling off the edge of the bed. He struck the side of his head on the nightstand, sending the flashlight of his phone flying. He landed hard in a sheet-tangled heap. Patrick, dazed and disoriented, looked up, seeing Alice in a crouched, feral stance on the bed. She tilted her head, looking at him, and made several clicking sounds. She began creeping toward him on all fours, her eyes never leaving his. A a throaty growl coming from deep within her. Patrick felt consciousness start to slip from him as Alice's fanged visage came creeping closer. Her mouth opened, her breath hot against his throat, and suddenly, a brilliant light followed by a deafening shriek. Patrick saw Alice reel back, covering her face before he finally passed out. When he woke up, the bedroom lights were on, but Alice was gone. Patrick's head throbbed painfully as he tried to untangle his legs and stand. After freeing himself, he stumbled around, looking for Alice, but only found a note simply saying, "I'm sorry." The month was October. The day before Halloween was a busy one. I worked at a grocery store, so it is always busy with parents buying decorations and costumes. At the store I worked at, we have a Halloween area in which we showcase all of our decorations with things like remote control spiders, electronic zombies, etc. On this Halloween Eve, I was working the night shift and I was about to close up for the night. I hear a kid scream in the workers only section, so I walked in and shouted, "Hello kid, you okay?" No answer, so I said it again. "Hello kid, you okay?" Still no answer, so I walked out thinking one of the decorations must be set on a timer. I turned the power off and was about to lock the doors when I see a light in the far corner of the store. I look over my shoulder, sighing and heading over to the light, but as soon as I got there, it turned off and I heard a child's laughter. "Alright kid, you got your Halloween prank in, go home." But the light stayed and flickered. I walked over to it, it shut off, and the one above the back room turned on. I headed towards the door, hesitantly turning the handle, but nothing's there. I hear something fall inside and flick on my flashlight, scanning it around the room. There was a tall pile of stuffed animals. I let my light linger there a little longer, felt like something was off. I looked closer and hear something slam in the main store. "Listen kid, it's time to go home." I saw a light illuminating from the clothing section. Walking over, I saw someone had tipped over the Skechers and that turned them on. I felt breathing on my neck and footsteps run behind me. I spun around and heard a child's laughter. I'd had enough and walked to the door, locking it behind me, but I shined my flashlight into the store to see if the kid was there. I did see a child, but it wasn't normal. His arms and legs twisted abnormally. I was about to shine my light over him when my car alarm went off. I turned around to see a crow has fell out of the sky onto my car. I looked at it closer. The eyes were gouged out and his wings torn to shreds. What the hell? I turned round to the store and the kid was staring at me, pointing at me and smirking. I never went back. It was a chilly October night. My friend Alexandria and I were both babysitting for our neighbor's children, the Doyles. Their parents were out for a dinner party with their company and wouldn't be home till late. This was fine for Alexandria and I. 31 days of Halloween was on, and we made hot apple cider for us and the kids to enjoy. It was a typical fall night until the doorbell rang. I got up, went to the door and opened it. No one was there. I looked out into the dark night to see if I could spot any kids playing Ding Dong Ditch, but the street was empty. A little concerned, I shut the door and went back to the living room. 5 minutes passed and the doorbell rang again. I hustled to the door, hoping to catch the pranksters red-handed this time. I opened the door, and again, no one was there. But this time, under the welcome mat, there was a note stuffed under it. I nervously picked up the note and read it. "You'll have to be quicker than that," the note said. "How about you check upstairs?" I turned around and saw a shadow disappear on the landing upstairs. My heart froze. No one was upstairs. Everyone was in the living room. I sprinted into the living room and dragged the kids and Alexandria out of the house. I showed her the note and told her I saw someone upstairs. We went to the next door neighbors, explained the situation, and called the police. When they finished the investigation, they informed us that they found duct tape, rope, and a steak knife in the upstairs bedroom. Also, one of the windows was forced open and damaged. The police told us we were lucky nothing happened to us. They had no idea how long the intruder was in the house for. That piece of information haunts me still. The Doyles came home early and they ended up staying with family that night who lived about 20 minutes away. Alexandria and I went back to my house, but we never went to sleep. This all happened about 5 years ago, but still, on chilly fall nights, I always wonder what would happen if we didn't leave the house when we did. What if whoever was in the house actually did what they planned on doing? I'm just thankful to God that I'm still alive. For the purposes of my story, I will use different names for me and my friends. My name is David, and at about the time of this story, it was October 30th, 2021, around 9:27. My friends, which I'll call Matthew, Jordan, Anthony, Adrienne, Lily, Cynthia, Adriana, and I were going to do a scare night. This is a tradition for us 14-year-olds. On the night before Halloween, we would get together and buy scary Halloween costumes and go play hide and seek throughout my neighborhood. We lived in a large one, so it was going to be hard when the seeker was picked. We would run, and the seeker would count in his house while putting on his costume. For the first game, Jordan was the seeker. As soon as he closed his door, I ran as fast as I could and Lily followed me. We hid together behind some bushes, but we hid on different sides. After a couple minutes, I heard Lily get up and run behind a house for no reason. She had said to change spots. I didn't follow as I thought my spot was good. While I hid, I noticed something. When I looked behind me into the forest, I thought I saw a tall, human-like figure that seemed to be wearing a hoodie. I didn't think much of it and continued to hide. Just as I started to hear faint crunches of leaves behind me, I got a text message from Lily in bold text. It said, "Stay calm and listen. Jordan's coming up behind you." I replied, "Okay, got it," and sprinted towards Lily. Once I made it to her, we both ran. As we were running, Jordan popped around the corner. We were both scared shitless. He was wearing a scary-ass clown mask. We screamed and he called us scaredy cats. When we made it to the timeout in the middle of my front yard, Lily asked me, "Who the hell was coming up behind you then, if Jordan was right there?" That freaked us out. But after a couple minutes, Anthony and Adrian came up to us. I said, "Let me guess, he scared you too, huh?" "I've been scared worse," said Anthony. After a couple minutes, I thought I heard more leaves rustling behind my house, but nobody seemed to pay attention to it. I peeked my head around the side of the house and I saw him, the man in the hoodie which was covering his face. As I looked at him, I took a quick photo of his face. Then he started turning his head towards me. I immediately went back to my friends and told them about what happened earlier. At first, they didn't believe me until I showed them the text that Lily sent me. We were confused, and their faces drained of color when I showed them the picture of him looking at the rest of the group. We decided to call off the game and yelled for everybody to meet up, and then ended the game. We asked Jordan, but he said he didn't know anything about the man. I was nervous, but eventually I did go to sleep. When I woke up, I saw 2 photos taped to my window. One was from behind me while I was hiding behind the bush, and another of me sleeping, taken through my window. On the back of one of the photos it said, "All the amazing things I could do with you, and I know what you did." We turned all the evidence over to the police, but no leads or suspects were ever found. We had decided we don't want to do those traditions anymore and won't for a good while. I just hope my friends and I are safe and sound. And Stalker, I hope we don't meet again. I had come to the cemetery that day to pay respects to someone that I had lost just a short 6 months ago. We were childhood friends, grew to be best friends, and eventually we fell in love. She was a headstrong girl, and she was as intelligent and funny as she was beautiful. We had become inseparable. We went to the same college, took a few of the same classes, and eventually even started talking about marriage. We had just started making the plans when she was taken from me. a man had somehow managed to sneak into the girls' dorm at the college and decided on her room. She had fallen asleep early in order to wake up to study for the finals that were coming up, so she had taken some sleeping aids to help her sleep through the night. Later, we found out that she miscalculated the dose to use and ended up using too much. This piece of shit of a human had slipped in with a knife, assaulted her, and then slit her throat, leaving her to bleed out in her bed all the while she was asleep. I came today because I cannot let go of what has been done to her. My heart aches at the thought that she was taken so violently, that I was not there to protect her, or that I would never see her loving face again. I stood at the end of her grave, just talking to her, telling her how much I missed her when I noticed a flash of white out of the corner of my eye. I glanced up, but there was no one there. I was certain I saw something, so much so that every single hair on my body was standing on end. I looked around for a moment longer when a shiver ran through my body. Then I went back to speaking to my dead girlfriend. As I continued, I heard the grind of metal and stone and looked up immediately. There in front of me, about 20 yards away, was a mausoleum, its doors standing wide open. I thought it was odd that the doors were open, so I figured the groundskeeper had gone inside. I tried to get a better look, but it was so dark I could not see anything. I stepped a few feet closer, but still, no luck seeing inside. I wanted to take a look, but I wasn't ready to leave just yet, so I turned back to the grave and continued to speak. Again, another flash of white from the corner of my eye. I turned expecting to see nothing, but this time, in the doorway of the mausoleum, was this beautiful woman, clothed in a white dress that seemed to float just above where it should be laying on her body. Her eyes were black as night, skin so pale, and jet black hair that flowed down her shoulders and back. She was beautiful, and she looked exactly like my love, except only more pale. I immediately started to walk her direction, but remembered it could not be her. She was laying in a grave not more than 10 feet away. I started to turn around and a small moan could be heard in the air. I looked back to the woman in white and she gestured with one hand to come to her, so I did, this time without hesitation. I arrived at the doors and she was still there, waiting for me. I took one step inside and she took my hand, leading me into the darkness beyond. I did not hear the doors close behind me, and I did not hear the shouts from the groundskeeper. The only thing I could hear was the sound of my heart fading the further I walked inside, and I was powerless to stop it. One day I was taking a Halloween walk with my hair in the cool October air when I saw a haunted house attraction. The spooky decorations and the antique style caught my eye well, so I approached closer. The closer I approached the house, the more details were visible. The antique wood had tears and scratches on it. The skeletons had dried red blood on them. Hopefully it was fake, and the gravel stones had cracks and rips. It all caught my eye, and the door was fucking beautiful. It was old, barren, and antique, with wood peeling from it. By God, the people who made this attraction really know their stuff when it comes to designing. I unconsciously said to myself in admiration of the antique house that lay before me. Then I entered the house and see that it is pitch black, with water dripping from the faucet, cobwebs everywhere, and more cracks. Soon, I progressed laughing at the cheap scares. The dim lights made me jump slightly, but it wasn't scary, not one bit. Then, I came across a room with a girl who looked to be about 6 years old, with tattered clothes, scary makeup, and some toys that she was playing with. She then looked at me, the scary makeup revealed in the dull lighting. "Come play with me," she said in a monotone voice. I had to admit, I was feeling a little on edge. I felt as if they really knew their stuff and scaring people too. I got to fucking get out of here, I thought to myself. "Come play with me," she said, not as a request, but as a command, which put me even more on edge. I normally don't get scared much. Heck, that's why I love horror movies. But this was pure nightmare fuel. but I kept a brave face. You don't want to leave me alone like Mommy and Daddy, would you? The girl asked with tears in her eyes. I felt bad for her, but I didn't want to play with her. Sorry, but I gotta go. Soon the door slammed shut, making sure that I would stay with the girl. Soon, the girl tugged at my pant leg. Play with me, she said, on the verge of tears. I was scared, I really was, but I decided to ignore the fear and play with her. To this day, I'm still playing with her. I must play with her after all. She is a very fun girl to be with, and I would love to marry her one day, stuck in this house forever and ever, with kids of our own. As a kid, my brother and I heard all kinds of wild, scary stories and urban legends. At recess, huddled around the slide entrance of the furthest jungle gym, we traded tales like Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Bloody Mary, the guy from the picture on our fridge, Freddy Krueger, all the usual suspects played roles in our half-imagined, half-retold fictions. One day we heard a new story that sounded both absurd and easily disprovable. A story that was told of monsters being everywhere at night as long as no one was looking at them. We knew we had to try it out. It was too ridiculous not to. Now the only catch to the story was there's only 2 days a year this works, Devil's Night and Halloween. And it just so happens, luck was on our side. The following night was Devil's Night, the night before Halloween, and our mother left us in charge of the house for an hour as she went to the store to grab a few things. We looked at each other knowingly and promised to be on our best behavior. The first few minutes we spent joking around, flipping through channels, watching the front window to make sure Mom hadn't forgot something and come back. After we were certain the coast was clear, we turned off the TV and went over to the side door. Briefly, we debated about whether we needed the lights on or off, but decided it didn't matter since it wasn't in the story, and those things are usually pretty explicit about turning off the lights. A brief nod signaled it was time to close our eyes, and then I counted down from 5. We opened the door, our eyes tightly shut, and the first thing I noticed was the sound. He stepped out first, and I hesitated. The sounds of crickets filled the night, louder than I had ever heard, louder than the train that ran behind our house. The air was buffeted like a helicopter was landing right outside on the porch. My stomach turned. All at once, an uneasy feeling of being watched overwhelmed me. I decided to open my eyes. I had to make sure nothing was there, watching us. My brain hadn't even sent the signal to my eyelids when I heard my brother's scream pierce the night. Instantly, my lids flew open, taken aback by the brightness of the porch light. I looked to my right and he was gone. I screamed his name, frantically scanning our yard, unable to see past the edges of where the porch light illuminated the yard. I realized it was much quieter than a moment ago. Not even the rustle of leaves on a tree reached my ears. Wringing my hands, I called again, too terrified to step forward, too worried for my brother to shut the door. Stomping my feet in place this time, I yelled, hiccuping on the last syllable. Tears welled up in the corners of my eyes, slowly burning my vision. I felt so cold and began to tremble as I took a step back and put my hand on the doorknob. One last time I whined his name, hoping he'd come out and stop messing with me. An instant passed, but felt longer than my entire life, and I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the door and fell to my knees sobbing. Hand still on the knob, I began to hyperventilate, unable to decide if I should lock the door or wait for his cruel joke to be over. Agonizing minutes I knelt, head against the door. Wails became whispers, and my stomach turned inside out. At some point, I passed out, because that's where my mom found me upon her return, never having moved from in front of an unlocked side door. It's not for kids, it's a true story. I won't say exactly where it was or use names. This happened around 2004 or 5. I was in college and lived with my much older boyfriend in a 4-room apartment complex. It had 2 shared bathrooms, one between each 2 rooms. It has 1 shared kitchen in the middle of each building. It was the cheapest place in the college town to live. Cars were broken into and slumlord management, etc. I think we paid $4.50 a month for that room back then. For the northernmost part of the West Coast, it was cheap back then. Typical tweaker town, poverty, no jobs, etc. There was a peculiar lady who lived in the bedroom catty-corner from us, and I guess she was around 55, but she could have been 70. I didn't know how old, but her Beatles posters clued me into her generation. She wouldn't say her age, actually. Anyway, she was on disability and basically laid in bed all day surrounded by old dusty knickknacks and watched old movies, like black and white movies. She was sick with a stomach thing, headaches, and mental issues. My boyfriend helped her with a few things, and she ended up talking to me a few times about her sad life. He wasn't the greatest guy and told me he talked her into giving him a pain pill. So she must have been sick, but then again, pain pills were common in the early 2000s. Prescribed by doctors who felt sorry for people in any type of pain. I never heard an actual named disease or condition. She told us about the adult daughter she never saw, and parents who hated her but paid her rent. Anyway, months passed and I one day noticed the windshield of her car was smashed. A day later, she was giving away things by setting them near her car with a free sign. When I asked her, she seemed ambivalent to the broken windshield. I was pretty ambivalent to her because she tended to talk too long and sort of trap you in conversation. Needless to say, I avoided her. I never saw her in the kitchen. She mostly just bought liters of soda and donuts, Twinkies, which she had laying around her room. She was super skinny too, even though all she ate was junk food, probably malnourished. So Halloween night was very close then. On the big party night, I was drinking a shot of vodka in the kitchen before the party when she came into the shared kitchen and began asking if she could have a shot, and I obliged. My boyfriend was a lightweight and already passed out from 2 shots, so he was useless. Otherwise, I would have left him with her to, talk with her. She was an older lady, and at the time, I trusted that someone older than me knew how to handle alcohol. I had no reason not to share on a holiday, as I was jolly and excited to go out. After a few shots together, I went to leave and she asked if she could come along with me. I was only 19 and was looking to hook up with friends and thinking that this old toothless lady would not be fun to babysit. Plus, she's in a nightgown, an old-fashioned nightgown, like a little rich girl in white lace. She acted odd, not just drunk, but also like she believed she was my peer and didn't understand why I wanted to go alone. Anyway, I was irritated by her and just wanted to leave. Big mistake. This is the part I regret. I left her. I gave her the rest of the bottle as I felt bad. I made an excuse I can't recall and left in a hurry. The party was okay and I crashed when I got home around 3 to 4 a.m. About 4 days after Halloween, neither my boyfriend or I had seen her. One day as I pulled up from work, an ambulance and hazmat truck were in front of our apartments. It turned out the poor woman had taken an entire bottle of her pain pills and drank the entire bottle that I'd left her with. Then she locked herself in her room. At the last minute, she tried to crawl to the door and get out, and was going to vomit up the pills. She died against the door. The EMTs had to yank the inner door off inside the kitchen because she was stuck up against it. She was gone when I came in, but there were stains on the kitchen floor from her being removed. Like stains that smelled and were obviously body fluids. I cleaned it up with bleach as I felt responsible. At the moment I was mopping, her super elderly parents showed up. They didn't say a word to me, but the look they gave me was nothing less than pure hatred. Like it was my fault she lived in this crappy slum. Or maybe they thought I was white trash, as the woman told me all the time she was from a rich family. They went into her room and closed the door. I felt bad and still will for a long time. Regardless of how physically and mentally ill she was, I wish I'd not given her that vodka. I didn't know anything about adult protective services or reporting self-neglect of disabled folks back then either. From now on, I pay special attention to individuals' mental states and try to help when I can. I had no idea giving away your stuff and acting manic were weird at that age. If anyone acts odd, just call the cops for a welfare check. It would have saved her life. For as long as it could, at least. He sat quietly on the couch in his living room, all alone. The lights were doused, the curtains drawn tight, and the last of the sunlight drained into the darkness. He could hear the excited shrieks in the distance. The high-pitched sounds tore through his flesh like broken glass, and he shuddered at their cold sting. It was starting. His paranoia gripped him tightly, making it difficult to breathe. He could almost feel clammy hands on his throat, but it was 2 hours before he could safely take more medication. The dates on the calendar inexorably marched through the seasons of the year, and finally, like an avalanche too big to dodge, it had arrived again. He dreaded this day. It never seemed to matter how hard he tried to hide. Somehow, they would still come looking for him, expecting him to greet them cheerfully. But he hadn't been in a state of mind to do that for years. He didn't know how to make his house look any less welcoming, short of a moat stocked with snapping alligators. He winced at that thought. No, that would probably just make them try harder. It started only seconds after the sun skulked over the low hills. He twitched as he heard the unmistakable sounds of footsteps along the path to his door. Had he forgot to lock the front gate? Or did they just have no respect for such obvious hints? He cringed as the footfalls reached the stairs to his porch. Time seemed to slow to a halt as he awaited the inevitable. There was a loud rapping at his door. "Trick or treat!" They all chimed in unison. He froze, hoping he hadn't made a sound. Several seconds later, it repeated. Their voices seemed more mocking this time around. Another pregnant pause followed. "I guess no one's home," he heard one voice say. "You know the rules." "Yup," a gruffer voice replied. "Egg his house back to the Stone Age." Oh, that was it. Being denied his sanctuary was one thing, but he wouldn't stand for mean-spirited vandalism. In a flash, he stood up, flipped the switch for the porch light, and flung the door open. "Don't you dare, you little monsters!" 4 startled faces stared with wild eyes. A witch, ghost, pirate, and a zombie met his gaze. They were probably between the ages of 7 and 10. A thin smile crept over his lips. He had to admit they had done well with their costumes. But by their age, he was well into the unstoppable decline. Suddenly, they brightened up. "Trick or treat!" they called in unison. The witch waved her hand with a flourish. "Bippity-boppity-boo!" The ghost twiddled her hands as she wailed playfully. "Candy!" The pirate brandished his cutlass. "Arr, we be fixin' to get some booty, or ye walk the plank, landlubber." The zombie merely stretched out his hands, his gaze blank as the moon. "Brains." "I don't have any candy," he huffed. "Go away." He felt himself start to shake. The terror was getting the best of him at the worst possible moment. Under his breath, he strove to assure himself that they were just kids. The pirate dropped his act. "Aw, come on, mister. It's Halloween, and you've got the best-looking haunted house in the whole neighborhood." What?" he boomed. The tremble became uncontrollable. He stepped back slowly into the darkness inside his front door. "Sure," the witch piped up. "Dead trees, broken fence, distressed and weathered siding. It's straight out of a ghost story." His rage and humiliation boiled over. "Those aren't decorations. That's how my house actually looks." Their faces fell. "Oh," the zombie looked embarrassed. "Well, we really liked it. We didn't mean nothing by it." "Well, there's no candy for you here," he growled. "So you better just leave." "You have to have some candy in your house," the ghost trilled. "Of course I do," he snapped. "But it's not for you." The witch looked at him with forlorn eyes. "Not even a little?" "No," he thundered. "Now go away." The kids exchanged knowing glances. "He won't give us any candy. the pirate observed. The zombie shrugged. You know the rules. His eyes opened wide as the witch, though remaining the same height, suddenly looked far older and more wrinkled. Her face curled into a vicious sneer and her wand cut through the air. Bippity-boppity-boo, she screeched. He felt himself fall to the floor and land on his back, finding himself unable to move. Glancing around wildly, he realized his arms and legs had vanished. What have you done to me? He shouted. A piercing agony erupted from his belly. The pirate stood over him, grinning evilly. His clothes tattered and worn, his cutlass sharp and polished. The tip of its blade ran up his torso with sickening efficiency. The pain was unbearable. His scream silenced by sensory overload. The pirate's raspy voice hit him like a sodded yardum. Thar be booty in here, mateys. The zombie had kneeled at his side. In a flash, teeth locked onto his skull and bit through. The pain didn't quite manage to block out the disgusting sensation of rotted flesh and leaking infections. Brains. It cheered as it took a few more bites. The ghost floated over him and into the house, her spectral wailing blotting out all other sounds. I could haunt this place for eternity. With the last remaining shreds of his consciousness, he watched the three monsters and their juvenile disguises, now futile, stroll triumphantly away from his front door. He managed a grim smile as he realized that all of his psychiatrists had been wrong. He wasn't paranoid, and he had never been crazy. He had simply realized the truth that no one else dared confront. His last words burbled from his lips. I was right all along. Devil's Night, the night before Halloween. All Hallows Eve, Eve. Some call it Mischief Night, but those who do miss the point entirely. They even tried to change the name to Angels Night in Detroit. They hosted entire teams of volunteers to try and prevent the hundreds of building and home fires that would be set. The volunteers would patrol neighborhoods beginning at dusk, with the goal of creating a presence that would stop the monsters from lighting the fires to begin with. And if they lit one anyway, the Angels Night volunteers would have immediate contact with authorities to send the closest fire department to extinguish the problem. Sure, it worked for a while, but that only allowed the public consciousness to regain focus on the true meaning of Devil's Night. It's not about the fires. The fires are simply a distraction, a redirection. Some say it's the one night every year that you can do literally anything you want, and it would be accepted by your community as part of the price of living. You give for 364 days, and you take for one. In my town, it's not uncommon to see armed residents on rooftops of their homes and businesses, brandishing shotguns from the time it gets dark until the rooster crows in the morning, signaling that it is once again safe to go about your daily routines. But that never stopped us. We knew where to go and where not to go. My usual group and I went out after 11 p.m. to begin the night's festivities. Brent was 16 and got his license, so he was driving us that night. In the trunk, we had bags full of toilet paper, eggs, paintball guns, and a few other goodies. We all met up at Brent's place, where we pushed his dad's Delta 88 down the street until we were at a safe distance, at which point Brent jumped in the driver's seat and started it up. We all piled in and headed off. You really think it's safe to take your dad's car without asking? I asked Brent. I do whatever I want. He doesn't have to know, Brent replied. We had a list of appointments we had to keep throughout the night. First up was Mr. Johnson from Johnson's Corner Store. The guy was always a jerk to us. Whenever we had entered the store, he'd start bitching. If it took more than 15 seconds between entering and taking what I wanted to the register, he'd start up again. You sure you have money? What are you trying to find? Are you stealing from me? If any one of us looked at a magazine, he'd yell, You gonna read it or you gonna buy it? Put it down or pay for it. We parked down the block from his house to avoid detection and took just what we needed on foot. We covered his tree in toilet paper, then each launched an egg at the windows as we took off running. Just when we had reached the car, we heard Johnson come out his front door and screaming something at us. I don't remember what it was, but I'm sure it was something like, You gonna pay for those eggs? We did. We did pay for those eggs, and we bought them from someone else's store, just to add insult to injury. We were gone before he had any chance of figuring out who it was, and it was too dark to see faces from that far away anyway. After that, we completed hits on 3 more run-of-the-mill jerks, all well deserving of it. There was Betty, the town busybody, who was always trying to get everybody in trouble for everything. She once claimed to my parents that my friends and I had thrown rocks at her window. It wasn't true. I had never been near her house, let alone thrown anything at it. I didn't even know where she lived at the time. I got grounded for a month for it, because my dad believed her without evidence and didn't believe me. Since I had to pay for a crime that I didn't commit, I figured it only fair that we actually commit the crime now, to make it even. Next up was Mr. Shaylen, who was always trying to get teen girls to come hang out with him at his house. He would regularly try to become friends with them by giving them music or movies that he knew they liked. He even tried with Joey's sister. Joey took the honors of the first egg at the guy's house. We also did a nice drive-by egging of Travis Becker's house. Travis was a 17-year-old who bullied all of us and everyone else who was smaller than him at school. You know the type. Football player, shiny teeth, thinks he's God's gift to women. We didn't want Travis's parents to be mistaken about why their house was targeted, so we made sure to yell some obscenities with the name Travis attached to the end as we were making our getaway. Pretty great night so far. Here's where things start to get hairy. Next on our hit list was Mr. Farley, a history teacher from our high school. He's the teacher who always got into everybody's business. If you were having a friendly tiff with someone in the hallway, he'd be the one that threatened detention for everyone involved, regardless of who did what. He was also the teacher who stopped and questioned you if you were in the hallway during class, whether you had a pass in hand or not. In fact, once I was using the restroom during a class, I could swear he came into the bathroom to harass and scare me. I was in a stall when I heard the door open, and I heard his familiar stomp or walk coming in. I heard him using a urinal, but instead of hearing him walk out the door afterwards, I heard nothing. I didn't even hear him wash his hands, like he was just standing there, waiting for me to come out of the stall so he could demand to see my pass, or otherwise question what I was doing there. I even think I heard him sniffing and getting closer to the stall door. After that sound stopped, I hurriedly got myself together, opened the door and expected to run past him, but he wasn't there. Somehow he had left without me hearing it. Farley lived down a dirt road in the area of town where you'd expect to see a lot of fields, maybe even a few farmers. We parked down the road. It was pretty scary to be honest, because there were no streetlights out here in this countrified area of town. We were basically walking through complete darkness in the middle of the night, where anything could happen to anybody and nobody would see it. The only lights were dim porch lights of some of the sparsely placed houses in the distance. After we walked for maybe 10 seconds, I turned to look back at the car, but it was so dark that I couldn't see it anymore. We had a special package for Farley. This wasn't a completely original plan, but we thought it would be funny to see him fall for it. Earlier in the night, while Steve cleaned up the gifts his dog left in the backyard, he prepared a brown paper sack full of this magnificent treat reserved for Mr. Farley. Steve set the bag on the porch, took out a lighter and set it ablaze. The rest of us launched an entire carton of eggs at the house, one by one, and then started running back towards the car. As we were running, I turned to look over my shoulder and saw Farley open his door, look down at the flaming bag, and then turn his head in our direction and just stare. He didn't bother with the flaming bag. He let it burn. He knew what it was. A few seconds later, I took another look over my shoulder to see Farley's shadow backlit by his porch light. He jumped off the porch and ran in our direction. "Oh God, he's coming!" I yelled. "What?" yelled Joey. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw the car appear to emerge from the darkness as we ran towards it. We all jumped in and Brent started it up. As the tires were spitting up dirt and we started to pull away, there was a loud thud from behind. When I looked back, the rear window was splattered brown. Farley had thrown Steve's doggy bag at our rear window. "Go, go, go! Get out of here!" Joey screamed. We fishtailed down the dirt road and sped towards freedom. Holy, breathed Steve. What the fu-, added Joey. Did he see any of our faces? Asked Brent. I don't know, I answered. We all fell silent for maybe 20 seconds. Our silence was then interrupted by a loud bang. Something hit the car. Oh fu-, what was that? Exclaimed Brent. I looked out the side window. Something was trailing us. There's something out there, I said. My dad is going to kill me. He loves this car, said Brent. This car is a piece, dude, said Joey. Oh, I'm sorry, your car is so much better. Oh, that's right, you don't have one, Brent replied. I reiterated, guys, shut up. There's something following us. What? Replied Joey. I don't know, it looks like an animal or something. Dude, we're doing 50 miles an hour. What runs that fast? Said Brent. Nobody answered. We were quiet for several minutes. I'm done for tonight. This is crazy, said Brent, interrupting the silence. Let's just go to the field, I said. The field was what we called the playground on my street. We would hang out there at night for lack of other places to go. We parked the Delta and went and sat at the table that we always use. There are huge dents in the back and the side of the car, said Brent. That was crazy, said Steve. That's an understatement, said Joey. That guy is nuts, I added. I'm dead. My dad is going to kill me when he sees that not only did I take the car without asking, but got it destroyed by some crazed lunatic, said Brent. Okay, Cameron. I just hope he didn't identify any of us, said Joey. We sat in contemplation for a few minutes. I was staring off into the distance at nothing in particular when I noticed a shape in the darkness that appeared to be moving. Guys, what is that? I whispered. What? Asked Steve. That, over there, it's moving, I replied. Everyone turned to look. After we all started staring, the thing looked as if it realized we had taken notice of it and started moving faster, and it was obvious that it was moving in our direction. Run, Brent screamed. Everyone jumped up and took off toward the car. Brent attempted to get in the car to make our getaway, but it was too late. The thing was up on him as soon as he stopped running to open the door. Whatever it was on all fours. It toppled him like he was nothing. Brent let out a blood-curdling scream, which was cut off only after a split second by the thing tearing his throat out. The rest of us kept running, away from the car. The three of us took cover in a backyard of one of the nearby houses. There was a barn in the back we took shelter in and tried to block the door by pushing a small tractor in front of it. What are we going to do? I don't want to die, whispered Joey. Shut up and wait for morning, replied Steve. Update. This is Joey. I'm finishing Bobby's story for him. I found this typed into his phone in the morning. He can't finish it himself, so I'm doing it to honor him. Last night in the barn, we started hearing a deep growling sound from outside. It was moving around the building and stopped in front of the door, where whatever it was started knocking quietly. We all sat frozen in place, trying not to even breathe. Bobby looked at us and whispered, "Shh." I stood up as quietly as possible to see if I could see anything outside the dusty window on the side of the barn facing the door. Whatever this thing was, it was large like some sort of animal. It was 6 feet tall, even though it was standing on all 4 legs. Steve and I climbed up to the hay loft of the barn to hide. Bobby stayed hidden on the lower level, even though we asked him to come with us. I don't know why he stayed down there. It was then that the thing outside of the barn started speaking. In a very low, gravelly, inhuman-sounding voice, it said,
"This isn't going to look good on your permanent high school record, boys. You don't want to get in trouble, now do you?"
We all stayed silent.
"Bobby,"
it said. I don't know why he did it, but Bobby replied, Mr. Farley? He said. The thing laughed quietly from outside the door, then said,
"I knew you'd do the right thing, Bobby. Let me in, and we'll talk about this."
Steve and I whispered down to Bobby, "No, shut up, do not get up." But Bobby ignored us. I think it must have been his good nature, wanting to turn himself in, and take the detention as punishment. He got up and slowly walked towards the door.
Yes, that's it. Open the door, Bobby,
the thing said. Steve and I pleaded once more through whispers. No, don't, Bobby, stay away from the door. But we were too late. Bobby's sense of morality overtook him. He pushed the tractor out of the way and opened the door. I covered my mouth with one hand and Steve's with the other to prevent us from accidentally making a sound. From our angle, all I could see was a large, dark shadow backlit by moonlight staring down Bobby. This thing was not a person, it was something else. It walked slowly through the door while Bobby walked backward, matching its pace.
It's important that you find the true meaning of Devil's Night, Bobby,
said the thing in a terrible voice.
This isn't about you or your friends. It's about us. The people of this town will surely remember after tonight.
And with that, it overtook Bobby. There was nothing he could do to fight it. It was over in an instant. Bobby now lay silent while the thing enjoyed its meal. After the thing finished, it moved back towards the door, then stopped just before exiting, and without even looking back, said in its demonic voice,
You boys make sure you're in school on Monday.
And then left through the door from which it entered. Neither Steve nor I spoke a word until sunrise. We climbed down from the hayloft. All that was left of Bobby was his clothing and his phone. I picked up his phone and put it in my pocket. Steve and I quietly walked outside, each going our own way home.